Right on. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our January 24th, 2022 City Council meeting. We will join in the Pledge of Allegiance, and following that, our invocation this evening will be given by Rob Kriepentrog from On-Site International Prayer, a familiar face to us here. Thank you so much for being here. Please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we pray, I want to just invite you all to the Westfield Community Prayer Breakfast coming up this April 20th of the IMMI Conference Center. We'll get some invitations out to you all shortly, but we're excited to have our very own Jake Gilbert as our keynote speaker this year, and this will be the third time we've held this event since 2018, so hope you all can join us then. But let's pray. Father, we love you, we bless you tonight, and we worship you in this place. Thank you that our city is meeting in a former house of worship, and tonight, Lord, at least in my heart, I worship you here as well. We thank you for the ability to meet, the liberty to do so in this nation, to decide, to discuss, to debate, and to move forward as a city. And I pray, Lord, your wisdom tonight for Mayor Cook, for our counselors, for our speakers and guests as they speak, as they share, as they listen, and more. I pray, Lord, for great advancements this year in the city of Westfield in the ways that you choose best to do so. Pray, Lord, tonight that the words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts would be pleasing to you, and Lord, that you would impart your joy to strengthen all of us. For we know the joy of the Lord is our strength. Finally, tonight, Lord, I pray that you would bring healing to our community for those who are ill with COVID or other diseases. There's plenty going around. Lord, we pray you do some supernatural healing as well as just some common healing as well. Most importantly, Lord, healing of hearts for divisions that have come up in recent months and years as well. Please unify us again as a city. And again, as I prayed before, strengthen us with your joy. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you. Mr. Johns, would you open and run the meeting?
Thank you. I will, Mayor Cook. Cindy Gossard has come down with the flu or some disease today. So Kim Strang is going to be acting as the clerk remotely tonight. Kim, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Could you please note the presence of a quorum?
Jake Gilbert,
Here.
Mike Johns,
Here.
Joe Edwards,
Here.
Scott Willis,
Here.
Cindy Spolgeri,
Here.
Scott Fry,
Here.
Troy Patton.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. First item on the agenda is any changes to the agenda. I would note that there is a typo under the docket, claims docket. It says docket for January 24th, 2021. It is 2022, so we can make that correction. That's the only change to this agenda. I would also note that on an earlier form of the agenda here, that we were going to have a report from the clerk treasurer's office, and that's been postponed to a later date. So moving on, then the next item would be the approval of the claims docket for the meeting minutes for January 10th, 2022. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion made by Scott Willis and seconded by Troy Patton. Kim, would you call the roll, please?
Joe Edwards,
Yes.
Cindy Spolgeri,
Yes.
Jake Gilbert,
Yes.
Troy Patton,
Yes.
Scott Fry,
Yes.
Scott Willis,
Yes.
Mike Johns.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
The next item then is the claims docket for January 24th, 2022. Counselors, do we have any questions or comments on that claims docket?
I just want to make sure that the invoice to BKD was updated.
Because I saw it previous, but I didn't see it afterwards. So is that right?
I believe it was.
Is it updated?
Kim, has the invoice for BKD been updated by, I think it was reduced by $10,000, is that correct?
Yeah.
I do not know that question. I was out all last week. I apologize.
We'll check that, Troy, and verify that it has been.
Okay.
Okay. So, because it was based upon the conversation with the ad hoc committee, the invoice was reduced by 10,000, is that correct? Yes. Yes, okay, thank you, Jake. All right, then do I have a motion to approve the claims docket for January 24th?
So moved.
Yeah. Second.
Motion made by Jake Gilbert, seconded by Troy Patton. Kim, would you call the roll, please?
Joe Edwards,
Yes.
Scott Fry,
Yes.
Mike Johns,
Yes.
Troy Patton,
Yes.
Cindy Spillier,
Yes.
Scott Willis,
Yes.
Jake Gilbert.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. All right, we're fortunate. We're actually going to have two presentations this evening. The first presentation is going to be by Kristen Berkman, who is a member of our APC, and she is also the chairman of the Streetscape Committee. So, Kristen, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, Council, Mr. Mayor. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight and talk about so many exciting things going on in our community. And I thought that we would start out maybe with just a little bit of background of how we got here tonight. And then there's a lot of different groups working on the downtown. And I thought it might be helpful, although I'm not leading the other two groups, they are keeping me very up to date and involved, and talk about how those groups will be collaborating together. And then we'll get to the Streetscape group that I am coordinating. So if we can go to that next slide, Kevin, fabulous. So there's actually 3 different teams doing some initiatives on the downtown, and I think it would be really helpful to kind of talk about each of those and what they're doing. So the first is the Streetscape implementation items. And this is actually driven from our comprehensive plan from the addendum in 2013. There were 10 of the top action items that we needed to do in order to have more information and more clarity for our downtown. One set of that you'll see on the left, which is creating the branding for Grand Junction, which we've somewhat done in a theme of connections in our downtown, but we're working on an illustrative passage or a narrative that will even be a little bit clearer to help add some definition to the downtown. So that's in process. Secondly, it's developing all those items like the sidewalks, the public seating, benches, the landscaping, the trash cans, the signage. So it's all those types of things that said we would go ahead and define them in the comp plan, and we haven't quite done that yet. And so this team is working on those items. Running in parallel is another initiative that actually Mike Johns put together with Dan Moyer, who's the president of the Downtown Westfield Association. And within their contract, and I'm talking about the Downtown Westfield Association, there are some items that they say in that contract that they will work on for the city. So some of those items are helping target areas of parking for the downtown. Also, some transit, whether it be bike, walking, cars, kind of doing some thoroughfare planning. And then lastly, looking at the land uses in the downtown. So what type of businesses would work? Do we want, how many hotels, how many grocery stores, that type of information. And so they're actually doing a market research study. They've partnered with a company called MKSK. And so they are doing that work, and they'll be reporting back to the city council and to Mayor Cook with those findings. Those team leaders are Dan Moyer and Steve Latour. Then we'll go to the third group, which is a biggie, State Road 32. As we all know, this is a big project within our downtown, and they have many initiatives that have to do with the construction and also the historic preservation of the different properties within the downtown. But I wanted to highlight tonight, because there's a little bit of overlap with that group and the Streetscape team, and we're going to be working closely with them on these items. Jonathan and I are going to each participate on each of the teams. So Jonathan's actually going to come to all of the Streetscape meetings, and I will be sitting in as a guest, not a voting member, on the meetings that they have for State Road 32 when they're discussing anything that would overlap with the Streetscape, just to listen in and understand what the different groups are wanting for our downtown. There's a couple of different items. One is the roundabouts, both at East Street and Westfield Boulevard. And there's some language within the COA document, which is the certificate of approval, where that team will be giving input and recommendations and have approval on the designs for those roundabouts. And then also, really an important aspect are the signs that will go downtown to show our historical properties. And so additionally, they're working on that. So we will stay closely collaborating with that group on those overlap items. Next, please. I just wanted to give an idea of all the different people that are involved, and we're going to want to have some community input sessions as well. But from a city government perspective, this is a very cross-functional group of people, and I won't read all the names, but we have quite a few from people from the city. And then we also have quite a few council members, APC members. Mayor Cook and Mike Johns are serving on 2 of the 3. So there's just a lot of collaboration between the groups. And I've also highlighted in black the people that are serving on more than one group as far as input. So I think that really speaks well to our community to have so many people involved and also have such a collaborative effort of people donate, in some cases donating their time, in some cases it's part of their job, but they're finding the time to do these special initiatives, which is fantastic. So part of the streetscape is when you start looking at our downtown, we have a lot of different districts. So one is the Gateway District that kind of looks at what's along 31. And then we have the Grand Junction District, which really focuses on the plaza and around the plaza. And then we have the historical districts, and so there's just different names within these districts. We also have, of course, a huge project in our city, which is State Road 32. And so as we sat down as a team, we received some information from Public Works that in order for Westfield to have the input that we would like on the streetscape, that we needed to have that feedback to them by March 31st, 2022. So yes, in a couple of months. And so as a team, we all decided that that's the top priority. So what you'll see is a phase 1 from the streetscape group, which is a focus on State Road 32. And I know I had emailed all of this to you prior, so I won't read every bullet point up here, but I just want to highlight that really the number one aspect of this entire project along 32 is safety. We want to make sure that our citizens and guests are safe as they walk along the sidewalks and visit our different businesses along State Road 32. So you'll see in the pictures on the next pages where we have some directional ideas for trying to keep our pedestrians safe. The other highlights are landscaping, infrastructure, lighting, and the roundabouts. So we'll be working on all of these different aspects of the streetscape for the road area along State Road 32. And this will be between the East Street roundabout and Westfield Boulevard roundabout in that area. The next one. The Streetscape team is using a platform called Jamboard. So as we find pictures that we think are interesting and might be applicable to the downtown, we are posting all of those different pictures and going over them in the meetings. And so these are a few ideas that are out there for overall in the downtown, not just State Road 32, because we're gathering those types of pictures. But if you see on the upper right, an idea of a raised bed for the tree, but it's also concrete and bricks to make it very sturdy that could be put along a road to help that safety aspect for the pedestrians. And it also has a ledge if someone wanted to sit down. And so we're trying to examine some of these multi-purpose ideas that add landscaping, safety, as well as some seating. So that's just one idea, but you'll see, if you want to go to the next one too, Kevin, these are just a few of the ideas that we're kind of trying to brainstorm and pull together. Councilor Spoljaric had seen this idea of solar pavers that can be used. So it's an energy saver and then also can light up at night. So we're exploring that. Chris McConnell, who's our parks director, had seen these glow-in-the-dark pebbles. And so we're just examining different ways that maybe you could put a design in a sidewalk in a special area where that would light up at night. And so we're just trying to find some really innovative and new ideas to explore for our downtown. If you want to go to the next one. So the team would like to recommend that we get some outside help for this part of the project for State Road 32, because as much as we're brainstorming different ideas, we know that there's experts out there that could come together and help give us more ideas and actually put it in a conceptual plan so we can all see how that might look. And so there's two firms currently that we're talking to. One is MKSK, and they have agreed to help with the project. The other group that we are currently talking to, they haven't committed, is Rendell Ernstberger and Associates. And we've talked about this with Public Works, and we feel like we could get conceptual drawings, ideas, not to the phase of engineering drawings, because Structure Point will be doing that work for the city, and we don't want to double pay for a service. So this would just be to come up with the different ideas and the different concepts for us all to look at. And Public Works gave a figure that they feel like $20,000 per vendor would get us things to look at and a feel that we could all evaluate. So I'm bringing this up tonight because I don't think this was previously put into any type of budget. So it would be something for you all to decide if you would like us to move forward with this particular part of the project where we hire some outside help. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on before I get all your feedback and input, which I'm excited about, is the budget for State Road 32. So right now, in the budget for the items I talked about, we have $330,222. We will be paying half, NDOT will be paying half. So this is what NDOT feels like would be a budget to do a minimal on the sidewalks, minimal plantings, the lighting, and some public seating. What we'll have to decide as a city, and all of you, is how much more would we want to spend to have a certain look along State Road 32. And so that would be direction. If we hire these outside firms, we would give them this initial budget, and then if you feel it's an important initiative that deserves more budget money, we would give them maybe a couple different tiers of money to work with. So with that, I am excited to hear your feedback and any questions.
Counselors?
Is the DWA currently paying for the work of MKSK?
Yes.
And how much is that they're paying?
May I ask Steve Latour? He's in the room.
Sure.
Yeah, it'll be $150,000, not to exceed $150,000.
What you're currently paying?
Market research part of the project.
Okay. But that market research part of the project does not include what we're talking about specifically.
That's correct.
And that's where you want the additional dollars for.
If we'd like to get outside design concepts.
So what would be the actual deliverable, if you will, for that money?
It would be ideas as far as all the lighting, all the benches, so they would actually bring forth with how much those items would cost, so we would know within our budget, and then actually drawing it into a concept, so we would see a picture of how those would look along State Road 32. So it would take them up to that point, but not any farther than that, because then you would move into engineering drawings, which has already been budgeted into the State Road 32 project.
Right, okay, thank you.
The budget for the design would include 32, the roundabouts, old downtown, Grand
Just-
Junction, everything?
State Road 32 and the roundabouts. However, let me add to this really quickly. Once we decide on lighting, that lighting is pretty much going all through the downtown because we're going to want consistency. When they spec benches, and it'll probably be a family of benches, we think that those will go in most places in the downtown. So I want to answer your question as honestly as I can, that I think a lot of these elements and these initial designs will carry throughout the downtown. I would say the part that I think we're missing is if we decide to do parkettes, which are little areas that might be very small parks with some public seating and a historical story, and maybe a small, very small playground item. And so we've talked about that. That's in the comp plan. And I think we would need more design help with that. But as far as many of these elements, once we get a look for the landscaping and those type of things on this, I think many of them will carry throughout the downtown.
Kristen, are sidewalks included in this look?
Yes.
Okay.
I know DWA has a budget and has money sitting in a bank account. Do you know how much you guys currently have on your books?
Well, some of those funds are allocated for staffing. Yeah.
Could you come forward, please?
Yes. Thank you, Mayor. Steve Latour with DWA. So there is money that we have in reserves with the intention of using that to put towards staffing and maintaining the office as well as the farmer's market. And then we have also begun negotiations with the city to buy some Christmas items for Grand Junction Plaza, like the Christmas tree and some other things like that we put money aside. So I think that we would be able to help post the market research plan if there's additional things that come from that, but we weren't ready to allocate this portion of money from this year's budget because we have already started to think about the holiday decorations and some of the other things that we're doing.
I think, appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Before you leave, I'd like to follow up on that real quickly.
Yeah.
When you say you think we might be able to help, and not asking you to etch something in stone, what does that mean?
Well, I mean, DWA is absolutely committed to creating the best downtown experience in Hamilton County. So we want to make sure that this is the best. And that's why with the support of council and these other groups that you saw on the slide, we invested that $150,000 towards the market research project. We know that project and the results from that project are going to yield additional projects, maybe some of these small parks, some of the historical things that we want to include where there might be a need for some of those resources. So we're hoping that through the large fundraising event that we host in the fall and some other things that we're going to try to do with sponsorships for DWA, that we can continue to be able to provide some financial assets for some of these bigger projects down the road. As far as a specific dollar amount, we haven't really talked beyond this initial 150,000 MKSK project. It was only kind of recently that we learned about that March deadline and the opportunity to add, our sense as to what the streetscape should look like. And so that's where it was like, oh, we better act quickly if we want to make sure that it's more than just the minimum that INDOT's providing. Does that answer your question at all?
Okay.
We're in this. We're going to continue to help. I mean, we want to see it be a good project. So I think we'll make every effort we can going forward.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I respect the timeline that you guys are under. I guess my concern is, so let's say we spend the 40,000, we do a design, and the design comes back and says we need to spend another $250,000 on landscaping. Do we have a will as a council to do that? And if the answer is no, why spend 40,000? So I think putting the cart before the horse, we might want to decide, are we willing to put extra dollars, whether it be through ARPA, through the budget, what have you, to support that before we vote on a $40,000 spend on something that may not be needed. Does that make sense? Or?
I think you always wonder how much it's going to cost. That's always a thing that you wonder about. But I'm old enough to remember when they first redid 32 through Westfield, 56 or 57. That's showing my age, I guess. And we'll have one crack at this in a generation. So we need to do it right. Even if we have to borrow a little money, we need to do it right. And you don't get many chances to do this with a state road. And we better do it.
This goes back to our original discussion on State Road 32 and how much is State Road 32 going to really cost. In my own head, the design firms to try to give us some guidance as to what we want it to look like, those were always in the budget. They had to be in the budget. We weren't going to sit around here and do it by ourselves, and we weren't going to ask Jeremy to design the city for us by himself. I think he'd like to have some input. So my own thought was that there was always going to be some design firms involved to give us those concepts to make it happen. And I would agree with Councilman Edwards that what we do downtown is a once-in-a-generation opportunity, and we need to make our downtown area look the best that it can be. And I'm not the kind of a guy that wants to do, let's do this year, and then 10 years from now, we're going to do step B, and 5 years later, we'll do step C. I think this is an opportunity to do it, to make it right from the beginning. So I personally would support getting some guidance in there, some design firms to help give us some direction.
I think one thing that we've talked about as a team also is landscaping makes such a huge difference in a corridor like this. It can help slow the traffic down, which I know we're maybe in two different ways. We want the traffic slowed down and NDOT wants it to speed up, but the bottom line is the safety of citizens is our number one concern. To me, there's not a number two. And so we do need to somehow find a way to make this corridor very attractive using landscaping and maybe some other elements, but to somewhat make it look like a park driving through and get people slowing down, making it safe, making it so people can go to the businesses along there.
I have a question for Kevin Todd. not to put you on the spot, but you do have a consulting budget. And is there any way that that would be a fit for your consulting budget?
I'd have to go back and look at those numbers and what other things that we've kind of projected for this year, but yeah, there may be, I don't know that I could cover all of it, but we may be able to help with part of that.
Okay, thanks.
Seems like a good fit, if possible, with the connection to the APC.
What kind of a timeline are you under, Chris? I heard March, but I mean, when do you have to have an answer from the council on funding for this?
Well, pretty soon.
Yesterday?
Yesterday. MKSK has said that they would like to be involved. I'm working with Rundle Ernstberger, but they want a little bit more information on what these budgets are, which is fair, if they'll participate. But it's very tight to give something to NDOT by March 31st. And we do want to do that, or we will miss a window of getting some input along this corridor. Sorry, I didn't really answer it, but it is yesterday.
Well, I would say, at this point, should we chew on this for 2 weeks and come back, or are we ready to just answer this evening?
Yeah, I'm just one thing here. I don't want to, I'd like to think about this, but just kind of curious, I mean, when you work with landscaping firms and everybody, I mean, a lot of times, I mean, they'll put together, programs and et cetera, because they want the business. I mean, why are we not doing that? I mean, and then I guess second of all is kind of, Mike, I mean, I think you were going there initially, is, we've already budgeted all these things. Why is it not already in there?
I would think that the basic design work should be within the State Road 32 budget.
I mean, I don't even know why we're even asking for money. We've already said this is what our money was. And truthfully, kind of what Scott Willis said, why spend $40,000 when they're going, because then maybe they come back and say, oh, we need to spend $250. Well, that's not even going to work anyways. I mean, it's all supposed to be already in the budget.
I mean, what is in the budget was, as I understand, State Road 32, and certainly we've got folks here who can probably speak to it better than I can, but it was a 50-50 deal to a maximum of 15 million, all right? And basically, NDOT is taking care of the building of the road and some of the land acquisition, and we're paying for things like taking down the telephone poles and streetscape and the basic fundamental.
So that would be already included in.
So the basic, that's why I thought the basic 20,000, 40,000 should have been
Right.
included within there.
Yeah, I'm not sure why, I mean,
So,
does it just open it, every time we have something small, it's like, somebody's going to come back and say, oh, well, we need 25,000 for this because we really didn't budget that.
now, to
And I'm
go,
not just saying this, I'm saying everything.
but to go beyond there, to really, to the design, when they come back and say, this is the streetscape we're recommending, I believe it's gonna be significantly more than that $330,000. I could see spending that in one of the roundabouts there. I think it could be 10 times that without blinking an eye.
Okay.
But, so I think we're gonna be looking at that more money, and that's why a year ago, I said, we start thinking about 15 million, we need to start thinking about 20 million for everything that we as a city want to have done.
Yeah, I remember.
And I think we want it done the right way. I'm not an anti-32. I want the city improved to the best it can be.
But that's what we thought we budgeted for.
Yeah, but
Okay.
that is the budget.
That's all.
We got an update at the quarterly briefing from the NDOT on State Road 32. Jeremy, you're an expert on this more than I am. I can certainly give a summary. Would you address this? Because I know we talked about this, about why there's potentially more than what was budgeted.
So to say I'm an expert is probably not exactly true. John Dale would be the expert. Are we talking specifically the landscaping? Or are we talking?
What NDOT's
budget
commitment was and why?
Yeah, so when we scoped the project in 2018, we were looking at, yes, we want to do lighting, we want to do some more aesthetically pleasing greenscape than what you would see if you're driving through a typical state road in a downtown city. And what you see there, that $300,000 will get you trees, and it will be better than that. But I believe what this group and what Mr. Johns and everyone is wanting to do is, we don't just want the $300,000. We want it to be a destination, and it to be safe, and it to be more beautiful than any other state road in any downtown anywhere. And so that is a change in the scope. And when you have a change in the scope, you have additional design fees and additional construction costs. So in the renderings that you've seen, I think we can do that for $330,000. If we're talking about ornate tree planter boxes that serve multifunctional purposes, if we're talking about stamped concrete, more decorative light poles that have banners and pedestrian lights and flower hanging baskets and all these other things that the group has been talking about, none of those things were considered in the original scope of the project. That's why there's the additional $40,000 that we've kind of earmarked as, that'll get us the concept, which will allow us to incorporate it in the plan. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question, I hope?
It does, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have a question for Kristen. What you're wanting here is simply soft cost design plans for what is to be implemented later.
That's correct.
Okay. So if we would meet again and if you would have a harder number on that in 2 weeks, would that be enough time to do it?
Do you mean harder number to add to the 330,000 to implement it?
Well,
Or
a
or just,
specific, it might not even be that much, I don't know, but chances are it will be.
For the-
Whatever we're gonna be obligated for, what is that?
Just for the design, to be clear, are you just talking about the design only?
Yes.
Are you asking her, can you
Yes.
wait 2 weeks to give her a yes?
That's correct.
yes,
Okay.
yes, we can get you a better number
Okay.
in 2 weeks,
No, you're asking for 40,000.
correct?
He's asking, can you wait 2 weeks for a yes or no on that question alone?
On the whole thing.
They
whatever it
won't,
is.
MKSK will probably be able to get started. I don't know that Rundle Ernstberger will be able to get started without a commitment to that.
Okay.
MKSK is already coming in Wednesday, and probably the DWA could cover the cost of that meeting, but probably not the actual design work.
So you're asking for a $40,000 down payment tonight, then?
Yes,
I'll just add that what I hope to get out of MKSK and Rundle is that we will be able to come back with a couple tiered design ideas. So if we want the Cadillac version of State Road 32, here is option 1, and it's going to be, X amount of dollars. Option 2 is going to be X amount of dollars, and option 3 will be X amount of dollars over the 330,000. But we're not able to give an estimate as to what a number is going to be until we have those conversations. And MKSK and Rundle have both done projects like this around the country. They have a good sense for the timeline, what it takes, what the costs are, involved. They're going to be able to give us, here are the 3 street lamps based on what you're looking for. Which of those would you prefer? The committee will be able to say, we like option 1 and 2. That will then go into those proposals. So to Mike John's point, President John's point, we'll be able to come back in front of this group and say, okay, we can do a $330,000 plan, like Jeremy said, according to the original plans. But if you want to excel the plan, here are your 3 options, and that would require additional dollars to be spent and added to the overall project. Because then we will turn all this information over to American Structure Point, who will engineer it and get the pricing needed to know what that exact number over 330,000 will be.
So we need to approve the 40,000 tonight, perhaps, to get the conversation started.
That would be the ask.
Yes.
How much did we give the DWA in the budget?
So it's scheduled for 30,000, and we anticipate spending about 45,000 this year on the farmer's market alone.
Okay.
So we
How much cash do you guys have on the books?
we have a couple 100,000.
Okay.
Let me go
But I
back.
would just say, Troy, or Councilman Patton, that like we have a proposal in front of us to consider investing $50,000 into the plaza this year in the way of Christmas stuff and things like that. So we're trying to look at now and in the future what those plans would be. And we want to be in a position to help as other areas of downtown are getting developed and planned, that we might be able to help be a part of that as
Yeah.
well.
I would prefer people to use the resources that they have first before asking for additional funds. That was just my comment. And you can call me Troy, it doesn't bother me, so.
Steve, on the, so I understand that the money that's budgeted, per Jeremy's comments, is for the $330,000 version of downtown.
Right,
If we want more than that, there would be more budget.
that's
The only part I just wanted a little more clarity on, so when we say research and we've paid them $150,000, DWA has paid them $150,000. I know land use, but none of that research is in design?
So I would say that that is two separate projects completely. So the $150,000 project is regarding the entire downtown corridor. So from 31 through East Street, all the way up to the high school, all the way to 161st, thank you. So that project is looking at everything from a commercial development standpoint, future tax, for the city. We're looking at roads, like she had mentioned, bike paths, all those sorts of things. While we were into this project, the conversation came up about State Road 32 specifically, and that was out of the scope of what MKSK is already working on. So since they've already invested a significant amount of money, the committee thought, well, this would be perhaps good to have them continue to work on this aspect of a different project. So that's why we were going to involve them and why we reached out to Rundle.
So there's a couple of things going on here at once,
Yes.
and I'll refer you back to Kristen's good separation there of who's doing what. It's complicated. Let me go back to this budget in the very beginning and remind you that if NDOT were doing this project themselves, the budget total listed as $330 would be zero. NDOT doesn't provide any of those three things. You can tell they don't do lighting if you'll go just west of 31 on 32. Very congested area, very dark. They don't do landscaping. The landscaping on 32 west is done and maintained by the city. Same thing with hardscape. So this was a number that we started with and were able to get NDOT to pay half of, I must remind you. So we have a very bare, basic study projection. And then I've heard from 2 or 3 counselors, heard from some public. If we're going to do this landscaping right, let's look at how much it's going to cost to do it well. And that's what Kristen and her group are proposing, to give us some options, different levels perhaps of what we can do and how much it'll cost.
So I'm going to throw a couple things out there, and I just want to, again, see if I can get a little bit of clarity here. First of all, appreciate very much what you're doing, and I agree with the sentiments here that several counselors have mentioned already. We've got one shot, we need to do it right. No question about it. I back that 100%. We absolutely need to take care of that. 32, we need to do it the right way, and it needs to look fantastic when it's all said and done, and obviously be safe. I wish we had these conversations last year when we were talking about 32. I'm not pointing any fingers, that's no one's fault. I think that would have just been a better time to have these conversations. Moving forward, the numbers that are on the screen there, we're gonna spend, the ask is $40,000 so that we can get someone to tell us how to make this look the way we want it to look. It's my understanding then, based on the conversation that I've heard kind of go back and forth here, we essentially already have $330,000 toward whatever the $40,000 determines. Is that correct? So the first $330,000 spent is what we already have budgeted. So if I take that thought a little bit farther down the road, can MKSK, is there reason to believe, is there confidence in the firm that says, hey, we've got $330,000, spend it the best way that we can and get us the best product we can for $330,000 that's already been budgeted? Or am I completely off track?
No, you're absolutely right. That would be, what we would give them is that number. We would also say, what would it look like? I'm going to throw out numbers, just throwing numbers out, okay? For 500,000, what could we get this to look like?
Okay.
For 750, what would it look like? And so then we can come back kind of to Mr. Willis's point and say, okay, we spent the 40, and now we know what we'll get for each of these price ranges. And then as a community, as a council, from the mayor, everybody together can say, well, we're happy with the 330, let's go with that. Or no, we feel like we would like to bump up. And then at that point, the discussion is budgeting that money and where do you find that money. But absolutely, their baseline will be coming back with the 330,000 because that's what's in the budget.
222.
Yeah, can I, and actually, Kristen, just to reiterate what Scott's saying, thank you for putting this together. And I mean, because I heard you say, we can go to them and say, hey, what would it look like for 330 or 500 or 750? How about saying, what would it look like for 290?
That's a good question. I think that money, how would that work from the 7 million?
Well, I'm just saying,
Standpoint,
then
the
the 40,000 is
7.5.
already baked into the,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
40
We can-
grand
we
just
can do
starts the
another-
conversation.
I'm kind of piggybacking on what Scott Willis is saying, and I'm not trying to paraphrase, but it's like, because he's saying, they come back and say, okay, well, it's 250 more than what we already did. Well, why not just say, well, $290,000? I mean, what can you make it look like for 290? I mean, we're only talking about, 12% difference more, 14, whatever. I mean, that's not that much difference. I mean,
So you're asking, let's have 4 levels, let's have the budget, let's have 1 below the budget, and have 2 above the budget.
I
and
never
see
liked
what
anything
those all-
above the budget, actually.
I think what
Look
he's
like-
saying, if I can paraphrase, instead of saying, we've got the budget, let's go below the budget, we've got the budget. The budget's $330,222.
Right.
Let's take 40,000 off of that it's gonna cost us to have somebody pay, or that it's gonna cost us to have someone tell us how to spend that money wisely.
I vote for
That is our
Scott
budget.
Fry's.
Does that make sense? I mean, does that?
Yeah.
If we're taking $40,000 out of 330, we're down to 290. So our budget that we have left is 290. What can you do for us, MKSK, for $290,000, make it look great?
That's fine, I'm happy to take that direction, if that's where everybody wants to go.
The only thing
I fear.
I would just add to that, if we give them that direction, then we don't have to pay them 40,000, we're paying probably 20,000, because we're only asking them to do one thing. We're giving them an exact budget, we're not asking them for a second and third tiers.
Again, I haven't had the conversations with them. I don't know what the anticipation is. I don't know what the expectations are. I want that to look fantastic. I don't want it to cost us any more money, but I'm realistic enough to understand that the way this seems to be working out, it's going to cost us a lot of extra money here, there, and everywhere else. I want to try to avoid that at all cost. So that's why I would like to take the approach of our budget's 330. We're going to pay you 40, now our budget's 290.
And I think standing here tonight, we just don't know. We don't know what 330 or 290 is going to look like. But I would rather us have an informed decision on, here's what that will look like, here's what another level would look like, here's what another level will look like, and then we make informed decisions on what we'd like to spend and what we'd like to do as a community.
I agree.
Is that fair?
I agree that we should, this is my opinion, I agree that we should have, hey, for a little bit more, here's what you could get. For a little bit more, here's what you could get. My concern is that we're going to spend 330, I mean, that's kind of considered already in the bag. We're going to spend another 40, and then our options are going to be, hey, for another $500,000, for another 1.2, for another ridiculous, additional amount of money, you could get this, which I'm a no on that. I mean, we've got to be conscious of how we're spending the dollars.
And you're talking about the cost of the project along 32, not design costs, right? The design costs are
I'm talking about
going to be locked in.
what the
We're not
options
gonna
are that they
spend
give
more.
us after the design is done, correct? So if the options that they give us are a ridiculous dollar figure,
Right.
I'm,
But we'll definitely have one that's 330,000
Okay.
or 290,
Or
however
290.
you guys want to do that. We'll definitely have that one
okay.
as a baseline for everybody to compare to, and maybe it'll be fabulous.
In-
I know,
I'm not clear where you, as a total group, want this group to go.
I think there's a multitude of.
Yeah, and we need to have a,
We already have design for that.
we already have a
correct?
design for $330.
Right. So the only question is, do we want to purchase design
Yeah,
beyond that?
do you want to, what you're talking about, do you want to purchase design options or not? Any design option is going to be more than 330. So if you don't want to spend any more than 330, there's no sense spending design money. So that, I guess, is really the question we
I
need
think
to
we
have
still have to
answered.
spend the design money, right, Andy? I mean,
Well, the very tricky part of this whole
Yes.
thing of it is
Yeah,
if
no,
we
wait,
don't.
well, hang on. Yes, we've spent, the design money for the 330 is already in the budget.
no, I mean, yeah, but
Yeah, that is correct. So the design money for the 330 is part of the structure point scope of services. And just so that we're all clear, that includes, so the $181,000 in lighting upgrade, that is our standard fixture that you see at our roundabouts around town, brought through the city, through downtown. The $95,000 is going to be trees in appropriate locations and some shrubs and maybe some other grasses and types of things. Hardscapes, I don't know exactly where we have hardscapes like planned right now, but really that's like benches at pedestrian crossings and things like that. Nothing beautiful and ornate. So the 330 is going to be the bare bones, which is still more than NDOT does generally anywhere else. They're gonna share this cost with us. Anything above that, we're gonna very likely shoulder ourselves. And to put into perspective what you get for $330,000, if you look at our most recent roundabout landscaping packages, I'll give you 186th and Grand Park Boulevard as an example. It's got hardscape, it's got plantings, and it looks really nice. It's not extravagant by any means. That roundabout project was about $125,000 for the roundabout itself. This is a mile-long stretch of road, so.
And now, does this include the two roundabouts?
The $330,000 is included in the project. There is nothing special about the roundabouts at this point in time.
It's just grass right now, correct?
Yes,
And yet our
East Street would look
COA
like what
does
we have at
call
Poplar.
for public art of some sort with historical relevance in the roundabouts, correct?
What was that? There is money in the budget for this, the response to the COA and those commitments. I can't give you the exact of what the roundabout landscaping or the art in the landscaping, I can't give you that number. John Nail is on, he may be able to tell you what we've allotted for that, but that would just be the art piece. That doesn't include anything that comes around it inclusive of a foundation and lighting and irrigation to get to the center. So.
But Jeremy, to be clear, you'd mentioned that what we have here is in the 330 is the upgrade that we're putting throughout the city, right?
The light fixtures are.
Light
yeah.
fixtures are, okay.
Which is just our construction standard for our roadways. If we build a roundabout, we have to have that standard because if it's an NDOT funded roundabout or a federally funded roundabout, it has to have lighting with it. We developed a standard and that's what you see all over the place.
If MKSK comes back and says, hey, for X number of dollars, here's the lighting that you can have, and that's what everyone decides on, it. This is what we want. We have $181,000 in the
To go
budget
toward the light fixtures.
that goes
Yep,
towards that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I got a quick question, just so we can move the ball forward here. Steve, would you split the cost with us if we went down this path? You find 20,000 in your budget, we find 20,000 in ours. knowing that you're gonna come back and ask for more probably later.
Yeah, I would, well, I probably have the spending authority of 10,000 on the spot without asking the rest of the board of directors, you know, if they're comfortable doing that. But I think it's important enough to make that happen. So, yeah, if that's what it takes to get this done so that we have some really good options to look at, I think that ultimately we want to see that happen, so.
Okay, so I'll make a motion that the council approve a $20,000 spend to look at the designs and see what it gives us, provided DWA matches that $20,000.
He doesn't know if he can do it.
Second.
Are you able to commit to that or not?
Yes,
Is what they're asking.
If he doesn't, it falls, then we're not bound to anything, so.
All right,
Okay.
just,
And-
okay, last thing, before we take a vote. I equate this to me saying I'm gonna build a house for $330,000. And by the way, I don't mean this in disrespect, because I think, I hope it turns out to be really nice. I have this much money, I'm gonna build a house for $330,000. Hey, but I'm gonna ask the architect to go ahead and put, what's it gonna look like if I wanna spend $500? I only have $330, but what's it look like for $500? And then give me a $750,000 picture also. And I guarantee the 500 is gonna look nicer. And guess what? The 750 is gonna look nicer. I mean, if that's the case, let's go to 2 million. And I bet, man, we can make it grand 32, right? I mean, I'm saying that's,
But I would, and I agree with anything you're saying, Troy. My wife's a realtor, and in the world of building homes, unfortunately, that's the process oftentimes they go. Well, I have a budget for 500, but I don't like the kitchen cabinets. What if I upgrade it? What would that cost? So I think it's a process. I can't promise you where I'm gonna be when they come back. If you come back for an ask, and I'm guessing you probably are going to, I can't promise I'll vote for that, but I'm willing to see what it gives us. For 20,000, and again, in the spirit of doing this right and making sure we're dotting every I and crossing every T, I think it's a worthy spend.
You can't get in the card game unless you ante up. That's the long and the short of it.
I would like to say, again, Kristen, I know it sounds like we might be picking on you a little bit, and I want you to understand, again, I'm personally very appreciative of the work and the effort that you've put into this, and I think it's a good cause. I do agree completely with a lot of what I'm hearing up here as far as the money. That's our job. We have to be conscious of the money that we're spending. So even though some stuff sounds like we're nitpicking a little bit, I want you to understand that's not a personal thing towards you, and I appreciate very much your effort.
I'm not taking it personally at all, just so you know. I'm a citizen in this community, and I'm very grateful that you are watching the budget. So I'm not taking that personally at all. I do want to address a couple things you said. I think what this design budget will get us is if we have a light pole and it costs $2,000 and we have to put so many in, we know that cost. If there's another one that costs $1,000 and that number is, let's say it's 30, whatever it is, all of a sudden we can pick what we like and get to these numbers. And so that's what I like about it is we can be accountable for what we spend. And there might be things that we think are fantastic and they're worth the money. And we might have to step back and say, we don't get that light pole because we can save $50,000 over there and we'd really like to have the landscaping. But without a design firm giving us those costs per item, we're not gonna know.
that's fair. That's fair.
So I think that we get the $500,000 look and we get those looks, but we're also gonna know what each of those pieces costs.
Sure.
And then we can make decisions from there. And then the other thing, this was quite a while ago for Mr. Patton, but you talked about the landscape designers.
Yeah.
You are correct on that. And then it goes, this is my understanding, and Jeremy can come speak to it if he needs to, but then it goes to bid for that. And then if that designer is not chosen, you end up paying the design fees to them. They only waive it if they get to supply the plants and the trees and everything. So if that matches up, that's a great thing for the city. If it doesn't, we end up paying those anyway. So I just wanted to answer that question. Do you want to expand on that?
So, and I'll confirm that for her. In our roundabout designs, that's specifically what we do. So for professional services, design services, we don't have to do an RFP. So we generally have selected a local a landscape company that will put together a design for us. We then package that and it goes out to public bid. Well, the laws of public bid don't guarantee the landscape company is going to win the construction contract, right? Construction contracts go to the low bidder. So in that case, if a different landscape company wins, then I subsequently will pay them for the design. If they win, then the design's free. Does that make sense?
So there's a motion to approve this, to approve $20,000 with the other $20,000 coming from DWA?
Yes.
Correct.
And as part of that process, we're gonna get something in that $300,000 range, where you get an option there, and a couple others to look at as well.
Okay,
Scott,
And Mr. Edwards was the big blind, I think.
yeah, there was
Thank you, second.
first and second, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so motion's been made
Okay.
by Mr. Willis and seconded by Mr. Edwards. So Kim, would you please call the roll?
We put
Kim,
her
were
to
you
sleep.
there?
Scott Willis,
Yes.
Denise Jerry,
Yes.
Jake Gilbert,
Yes.
Mike Johns,
Yes?
Joe Edwards,
Yes.
Roy Patton,
Yes,
Scott Fry.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you, Kristen, very
Thanks,
much.
Kristen.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I so appreciate the time and the conversation tonight. I want all of you to know, I think you all have my email, so reach out at any time. I'm happy to get together with any of you, and we'll be putting together a process for how all of you will be reviewing these designs. And if there was additional feedback or input based on pictures or anything like that, please email those to me, and we'll get those put into the package.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions for me?
Thank you very much.
I just have two comments to make. First of all, again, thank you, Kristen, trying to hold these three different groups together and get them to work together and make sense is not an easy task, and we certainly appreciate your efforts to do that. And the second thing is I do want to make sure that we give a definite recognition to the DWA, who have been around for a long time, and they've been accumulating money for a long time and sitting there. But when the time came to step up and give some assistance to the city to really kick this off, they met with Mayor Cook and myself and offered to contribute $150,000, $170,000 now to the project. And you have my sincere thanks for that. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We're going to have a second presentation this evening from council representatives on the RDC, Linda Nass and Bob Otry. A quarterly update. Bob and Linda, are you prepared? Ready?
Thank you, Council. Good evening, Mayor, Council. Okay. So, here to give the, what's supposed to be a quarterly report, however, it's gonna be a little bit more since we haven't had one for the third quarter. So, encapsulated, going back to August 16th, the meetings, and the highlights. I'm gonna try to make this as brief but detailed as possible. Basically, on August 16th, most of the meeting focus was on the 2022 Grand Park budget. It was presented by William Knox, at that time, the Grand Park Executive Director, as you know, and it was fairly well detailed. He presented a lot of numbers and information and answered quite a few questions that we had. William had an open door with us this past year, and we've had several one-on-one conversations with him, so we've stayed fairly knowledgeable in crafting this. I mean, I don't know who creates the budget or approves it, but we got it, and if you want to see it, we can share it, or it's probably public online anyway. From there, it was also agreed upon that we would start receiving consent agendas as monthly, if needed, to approve Grand Park user agreements. So that's something new that was added. This was previously handled by William Knox. So moving to September 20th. We started off the meeting with claims. There were some invoices from O.W. Crone that carried balances that were being paid for out of several different TIF areas. Linda, I think, questioned why these funds were being paid out of the different TIFs when in the past they had been funded through the General Consulting Fund that ends 1331. We were explaining that nothing has ever been changed or instructed to be changed, so we didn't really feel like we got the answer we were looking for. So the motion passed 3-2 with the two council appointees voting no. Then John Rogers presented the economic development overview for the city. He included TIF maps with some cost details, and at the time admitted that there had been some slight changes and that he would be providing us with updates, which he did do at a future time. The question was asked why certain TIF funds were carrying substantial balances in them. And these balances are rolling over. It was explained to us that they are retained dollars to fulfill future developer agreements obligations. We don't have, and I think we're going to recommend, we need to have what developer agreement obligations are on the books but are not funded yet, so that we know what's coming. So hopefully we can get that. It was also stated that the 2022 RDC budget did not require a vote for approval, which I was a little bit surprised by. So there's basically no budget detail provided, or it's not known who actually approves the budget or even puts it together, really. We can guess, but. And then Todd Bertrand made a presentation to let us know that the bullpen MOU give back Westfield had been implemented. He'd received that from bullpen. That reduced the costs to Westfield residents, Westfield teams that participate at Grand Park. So it's pretty straightforward. I guess they're going to be doing some publicizing of that for the upcoming season, because when that came down, it was the end of the season last year. We also entertained a presentation from Tree Toppers, which has interest in coming to Grand Park and opening up one of those tree parks that has zip lines and things of that nature. October, we ratified some Grand Park user agreements. We entertained the initial proposal for tree runners. However, it was later discussed that we probably needed to do that through an RFP process. So, and then our initial discussion about William Knox's departure as executive director of Grand Park and his interest in pursuing a continued involvement through his Legacy Sports Group, running the administrative/sales side of Grand Park. And we had some discussion about that. In November, we had two meetings, the 15th and the 22nd. We had claims. We had an MOU discussion with about Noblesville schools using Grand Park as a reunification site. We also discussed the land purchase agreement with SEP, which is one of the developer obligations that we had to purchase the land back to do the trailhead. We had received two bids as required by Indiana Code. $237,150 was one of the bids, and $521,000 was the other bid. So both Linda and I thought that there was so much disparity that it mandated that we should probably look into a third appraisal. I can tell you on more than one occasion, it was explained to me that we've met our statutory requirement. It wasn't needed. And if I go back to Troy's explanation, I used this in the meeting at the time, and I said, imagine you're selling your house, and one realtor appraises it 237 and another one appraises at 521, do you split the difference, or do you go out and find a third appraisal to find out what it's truly worth? I mean, that's what I would do. I think anybody with common sense would, but. So it passed 3-2 with Linda and I voting no. And it was a little bit frustrating for me because I felt like it was a pretty obvious choice. The 22nd, we reviewed the bullpen escrow account and what their future anticipated needs were going to be out at Grand Park to maintain and improve fields and such. December 13th and 20th were our December meetings. We had two. I was not present at the 13th meeting. However, I went back and watched it on YouTube. It was a short meeting, and most of it was to clarify points on Williams' Legacy Group contract and to answer any questions that the RDC may have. And also the 2022 RDC schedule was approved. On the 20th, we were able to finally approve the Legacy Sports Group contract with William. It had gone through the vesting process with legal and all that, so everything was given the go. We did that. Linda and I both requested updated TIF maps and copies of the 2019 and 2021 Colts camp audit reports as are required by contract. Which leads us to January, which is our most recent meeting. Most of the meeting involved the talk of Grand Millennium and amendments presented by the 3132 Investor LLC, Representative Birch Dalton. Can't really talk about details at this time, but probably most of the information you would want to know about it are available online on YouTube at the meeting. So if you want to hear a little bit about that, just about everything was discussed that we can't talk about. In one, let's see. It was declared also at that meeting that the RFP for the tree park had finally gone out, and I guess they were waiting on responses to that. Matt Trinian made the Colts Camp audit presentation as we'd requested, so we got to see some of that. And it was recommended and approved that moving forward, agendas will include an old business section, and I think that was unanimous that we all agreed that that would be helpful and appropriate. There was also an election of officers in which a motion was made to just carry forward with all the officers as they were in 2021. It was approved, passed 3-2, so obviously Linda and I are not officers, not that we really wanted to be. I just found it a little bit comical that they did it in one motion. What else? I also had brought up with John Rogers Resolution 14.122, which, as many of you know, is a 2014 dated document where the city loaned the RDC, I believe was $6 million or so, to Grand Park, which was to be a loan to be repaid back. It's been 7 years. There's been no talk about it, no schedule of repayment. I said we need to address that. It came out of what was called the Infrastructure Improvement Fund. So when you're looking for money for things like streetscapes, there you go. There's money right there that you could collect. So with that, I'll turn it over to Linda, and I guess she will encapsulate some of her concerns and topics of discussion.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm really just covering pending and upcoming, so we know what things we're looking for. We have seen some changes, as Bob talked about. He kind of went over the meetings that we've had since the last time we reported on July 26th. So we do have upcoming, hopefully tomorrow night, we have asked for the total of the Union Square TIF services that are paid to date are to be presented tomorrow evening. They have been considerable. Sometimes they're $7,500, $10,000. That's been going on for a few years. So we just want to know how much it is and should we find another way to recoup these other than take them on a different TIFs, 5 different TIFs, which they really don't relate to. Every TIF that's receiving money has its own budget of TIF services, which are the O.W. Crone expenses. But since Union Square just started and we've only received $44 in their TIF, normally this would have gone into the admin consulting fund, but now it's being divided by other TIFs. And we're looking at ways, can we capture this and charge it back in origination costs when we put together bonds or something for the Union Square project? So we need to know what that amount is, but it's significantly more than others. And it's also the same on Wheeler and Lantern Commons. So we just want to get those numbers. We're expecting those tomorrow at our meeting. Tomorrow we're having a special meeting, and it's starting at 6 o'clock tomorrow. So on the 2022 budget, we did get these TIF maps, and there's a TIF map on the back side is a budget. Now, mind you, we do have 25 TIFs. That's according to the county. They put out every year how much they receive, how much they value them at. However, in our funding, in the fund report that's put out monthly by the clerk treasurer's office, there are only 11 fund accounts receiving money. But what we would like to suggest, and we have been suggesting, could we please see each one of the TIFs? Because I don't know if you were aware, but in our meeting recently, we dissolved 2 TIFs. And another TIF we had to remove a lot of parcels from because there can be no single-family parcels within TIFs. We still have some that are like that, but the state and the county have now decided that they're going to take care of automatically removing those. But it's good for us, since we are the RDC and we are kind of in charge of TIF and deciding what gets spent out of it, that we ought to know a little more detail about them. So when we asked last Tuesday night for information, we got a 1-page, which was the core 4. So we have the 4 that have the most money, but we would like to see the total 25. And if you want to bundle some of them together, like Grand Junction has 3 different TIFs, Aurora had 2 different TIFs, and we just dissolved one. We're going to make another new one. We'd like to know that so we can make educated decisions and analyze things. So we have asked for that. The thing that John and did with help this year from our map department was that they did draw up a map of some of the TIFs and some of them bundled, so maybe we can pull some of those apart. But you can see on there all these parcels, and you can see as it grows or as it doesn't. So that's kind of what we have decided that we're going to use for our annual. When it comes with the budget annually, here's how our TIFs are looking. They're growing, they're getting smaller, whatever they're doing, and the budget that goes with them. So that we thought was a great idea this year that he brought forth, and we look forward to that. So if we want to look at our TIF districts, we should be able to pull that up. The MOU that was talked about and did go into place last year, I believe about May, we're looking forward to that because Todd answered when we asked about that we'll look at that at the beginning of this year and see if we're advertising it enough, if people really know enough about it, and set up some process that may work better, because we had a little trouble last year knowing who to let in and who not, because we have 6 cities in this town in Westfield. So we're hoping that very soon now that's worked on before the Grand Park Fields open up. But that's something we'd like to see more and more residents take advantage of. You can go there free. Be great. Hear about it all the time. Coming up in about February, usually it's done in February, but it's due by April 1st, is the report coming to the mayor and the council. It comes from the RDC. The problem is we never used to get a copy of it, so we did acquire a copy this past year, and we're looking forward to getting the copy next year that tells us 4 things. The Redevelopment Commission detailed the summary of revenues, expenditures, and cash balances, information on outstanding TIF debt, and an exhibit that has all the parcel listings for all TIF areas. So it's supposedly, quote, per Indiana code, comes from us, so we've kind of established that we'd like to see it, okay? So that has been coming out. Last year it came out on February 26th. It is due by April, and then it goes into the DLGF. It's put into that system, the gateway system. Coming up very soon, we want to continue with the fact that Chairman Plankus at our November meeting asked, going into 2022, that the commissioners receive by Thursday all paperwork that supports the agenda for the upcoming meeting. We have a meeting tomorrow night at 4:51 today. I was still getting information. I'll probably still get information tomorrow. So we've asked to have that done, and we're hoping we can accomplish that this year, because RDC is a lot of numbers, it's a lot of paperwork, it's a lot of documents, and we'd like to have them in advance. So the other issue with that, we've talked about a bit, is locating the documents and later signed documents for reference. And for those that are allowable for public purview, are we getting those on the city website so people can see them? Of course, you know that everything the RDC does is under the ODL laws, the open door laws, but it's kind of a hassle if you have to keep asking. But I'm on the RDC and I have to keep asking, where's this document? Could I get it? Was it ever signed? So hopefully we'll get some better processes in place to find those. The school board, we have a school board member appointed for a term of 2 years. That was set up in 2008. We've only had two. We had Rebecca Ogle for 2 years, and this past year they appointed Jimmy Cox. It's a person recommended by the school board. They are a non-voting member, but they serve, and Jimmy withdrew at the end of the year, so tomorrow night we'll have a new member recommended by the school board, appointed technically by the mayor. So we look forward to that. We did this year, all voting members of the RDC took oaths this year. So last year, I think it was just the new people, me, but now we're going to do that every year, recommended by the attorneys. I think that's a good idea, that we have records that everybody took their oath and they're serving in this year, and it helps to keep that record. Maintenance and capital improvements for RDC and Grand Park. We're looking forward to continuing going through that list and determining where we can find the funds to do some of the things that are being requested for RDC projects or Grand Park. Out at Grand Park, we do have the BPT bullpen escrow account that's been set up, and we hope that that continues. It's like $285,000 a year. And we're looking at a Grand Park escrow account to be set up for the other side of the Grand Park. And then we have TIF dollars that we can use for some of these RDC projects. And we're trying to get our arms around what exactly they are and what they've been planned to use for. And I think Bob already spoke to that about developer agreements, because this year we found out about some agreements we didn't know we had. Not that they're not public, not that you couldn't find them if you knew to look for them, but they do affect TIF dollars and possible payments to be made. The one was the land transfer standby agreement with 3132, and that's an amount right now of $6 million. That is a public document. It's recorded at the courthouse, at the county offices. The monthly, we do see the bullpen tournament financials. They like to keep some of that confidential, proprietary. So when we get notice, we can go in and see these documents. I've done that every month that I've received a notice and somebody's had a document for me, and that's been kind of regular since I joined in June. Last one I went to was December 2nd. Joe Plankus went with me, and we haven't had a notice since December 2nd. So hopefully we'll get to see those again. But according to the contract with Bullpen, those are supposed to be seen by the RDC every month. So we're just trying to comply with our contracts that we have out there. In May of 2017, there was a letter of support to the APC for the Downtown Comp Plan Addendum sent out. We are hoping that we get an update on what's going on in that. We haven't heard anything since that was sent in May. Monthly, we do receive the Grand Park contracts, user agreements. That just started this past summer. So it could be 75 documents. It could be hundreds of pages and hundreds of documents. And we are sent those. I have read every single one of those, but it kind of lets us know what's going on out at the park. Who's renting what, who's doing what. And William has been very good at how he handles those and gets everything signed, and you can check and see that what they were supposed to pay gets paid, but it's a good process, and they just started that a few months ago. John Rogers and Cam Starnes, our attorney at the last week's meeting, said they had sent an RFP for the construction of a tree course for Grand Park. We have not seen that. We don't know exactly what's in it. We asked for it last week. We haven't received that yet. Hopefully, we'll get it at tomorrow's meeting or sometime. But we weren't a part of the draft process or approving, here's what we want to go out, but it did go out. And Joe Plankus announced at our last Tuesday night meeting that he and I, Lyndon Ass, will be the RFP committee. So we will review results when they come in and go through them and submit something to the commission to consider as a whole. We are going to revisit the use of retained dollars in the TIF, because if you look at the projections, they go from the end of last year, we had over $13,500 in TIF funds. That is projected to be over $28 million in 5 years. And this is what may be committed already for projects, but we're the RDC and we don't know that. So we would just like to get that information. So we are suggesting that, that we get copies of all developer agreements and other liabilities that could be paid by TIF funds and keep a summary so we kind of have a running total, because, you know, it may blow my mind and your mind to think in 5 years we're going to need $28 million for I'm not sure what, but we as the commission make those decisions, so we should have that information. And to date, we haven't really had that information. The resource we use for RDC finances that I use is the fund report. It is put out monthly by, I think I'm doing that. It's put out monthly by the Clerk Treasurer's Office on the city website with other financial reports. But the fund report and then the appropriations summary report gives us a month-to-month balance in every TIF account. Now, mind you, the county doesn't pay us every month, but you can see where the TIF accounts, for example, you can see how much we're spending out of them every month. And so that's what I go to, and that's what I use, because sometimes I'm late in getting other documents. The sustainability report is put together by Financial Solutions. We pay them for that, and it's for the entire city and RDC, but we only see that once a year. So that doesn't really give us enough information for some of the decisions we need to be making or what we're considering. All this information is available to Todd Bertrand and John Rogers, who do some of the office things, a lot of them, and because they have full access to the NAV accounting system for the city. So any day they can go in and see everything that's going on, everything that's being paid out. But as the RDC, we don't get that information. Some of it we need to get, some of it we need to get more often. So it would be helpful if they would use their access and prepare us financial information in real time. So we can just, I can't push a button and see it, but they can, and I have to wait until the clerk treasurer puts it out there. But what's interesting is what the clerk treasurer puts out is what they're seeing, and that is what Financial Solutions uses to create the sustainability report, and that is also what John uses to create the Core 4, or any report that he gives us on TIF, because it all has to reconcile back to what the clerk treasurer put in. So that is, if you get those reports, any of us can get them, anyone in the public can get them, those are real numbers, okay? So I rely on those a lot to get information more quickly. I'd love to see the sustainability report, because I believe John calls that his working document, and it's worked on constantly, and it changes constantly. And if you've ever spoken with Greg Garitas, you know that it does change all the time, and he's always working in it. But we see it once a year. So I just asked for it in last month's meeting, and I got the one from September. And I'm like, thank you very much for sending this, but I saw that in October 1st. I'd like something updated, something a little more current, because we're now in January, and we need to make some big decisions coming up here. So I think those are the kind of things we're looking for. Some of our processes has changed, and you all spend a lot of money on a lot of reports, and hopefully, other things will change in the city, and we'll become really, really functional and really up to date, and because some of the things we look are pretty serious and lots of money that we're talking about, so that we can make the best decisions. So if you have any questions, Bob and I are here to answer. Right? That's all I really had.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any councilors, any questions? This one, comments?
No,
Thank
great.
you for the report, appreciate it. Moving on to old business, we've got two items this evening. First is ordinance 21-47, the Courtyards at Spring Mill. This ordinance had a council introduction on October 12th of last year. APC public hearing was held on November 1st. APC recommendation had a favorable recommendation on January 18th, and it's up for adoption consideration this evening. I believe John Dobashewitz is going to address this ordinance. Tell us a little bit about the project, John.
There's one more, maybe reduce down one more. Thank you and good evening. For the record, my name is John Dobashewitz. I'm a land use professional with the law firm Nelson and Frankenberger. We represent the petitioner, Platinum Properties Management Company, as well as Epcon Westfield LLC, and present tonight on their behalfs are Steve Edwards of Platinum Properties, Brooks Longfellow of Epcon, as well as Jim Schooner, an attorney with our office. As noted, the matter before you this evening is the Courtyards at Spring Mill and corresponding age-restricted empty nester residential community. This evening, the applicant is returning to the City Council with a favorable recommendation from the Plan Commission for approval of the subject PUD. By way of general background, we appeared before the City Council in October for introduction of the zoning request. The subject parcels outlined in yellow on the aerial on display here and consist of approximately 68 acres. It's located east of and adjacent to Spring Mill Road and north of State Road 32 in general. As shown, the uses surrounding the real estate include the existing airstrip and future Wheeler Landing PUD development to our east. To the south is the Spring Mill Center commercial PUD along State Road 32. Let's see if I can get the pointer to work here. There we go. There we are. I apologize because it's going out. This is the Spring Mill Center. This is the Wheeler Landing PUD. You can see the zoning established here and the airstrip immediately adjacent on the adjacent parcel. To the southwest and west are the Orchard View and Somerset residential neighborhoods, and to the north are individual residential parcels, generally at the corner of Spring Mill Road and 186th Street. If you can advance, Kevin. Since we were last before the council, several modifications and enhancements have been made to the plan. Namely, that would be a reduction in the number of homes to 184, where we previously presented in front of the council as an age-targeted community. There's been age-restricted language added to the ordinance, so it would be a federally recognized age-restricted community within the development. The concept plan was modified to eliminate a grid street pattern, which was recommended by the Plan Commission. Several architectural enhancements were made to make those consistent with the images that I'll show you in a minute of the proposed homes. Amenity enhancements and a timeline was established that requires amenities can be constructed sooner than would otherwise be required under the UDO. And we've enhanced the buffer along Spring Mill Road with the undulating mound in addition to the four-board fence. So we would meet the requirements, not meet the requirements along Spring Mill Road in terms of buffering, but we would exceed those requirements. And lastly, there were perimeter separation enhancements along the east property line made with regard to setback, fence and pond configuration, and no gate or openings along that east perimeter in respect to a copy of a letter that I'll go through with you from the NDOT Aviation Division relative to FAA requirements for the position of the real estate adjacent to the airstrip. Can you advance to the next slide, Kevin? These are character illustrations of examples of the homes and the architectural that will be constructed here. They are included in the ordinance, and architectural written requirements are provided in the ordinance as well to result in the homes that you see here. As reported previously, the applicant's anticipating single-family home values to be between $350,000 and $550,000, with an expected average well over $450,000. If you go to the next slide, please. Another one of the exhibits that's consistent with the concept plan is the provision of sidewalk and paths
The dashed black line you can see that surrounds the pond would be to energize that open space area and make it available to all the residents in the community so they could enjoy that space in walking on that path. The next slide, please. These provide more illustrations of the amenities. The community will be rich in lifestyle benefits desired by those seeking a home in Westfield that provides a quality opportunity to right size. Both active and passive amenities are provided. Character photos provided. Examples are here and included in the ordinance. There are, in actuality, 3 small, in addition to the large amenity area, there are 3 smaller parkette areas, including seating and landscaping, which are provided in addition to that larger centrally located clubhouse. In respect to the clubhouse facility and that amenity space that's centrally located here, as I indicated, it will be constructed before the issuance of 80 building permits, which puts it well in advance of the 50% required under the UDO. It's a 2,500 square foot clubhouse that'll include restrooms, a community room, outdoor fireplace gathering area, as well as of course, a swimming pool. The next slide, please. This is an illustration of that buffering along Spring Mill Road. The 4-board fence will be along that Spring Mill Road frontage, and then in that space between, apologize here, in that space between the, another one here, back up. Got 2 batteries going out. There you go. In this space here, we're also going to provide an undulating 3 to 6 foot tall mound along that space. It was previously discussed potentially that the house would face Spring Mill Road, but ultimately in our discussions with Plan Commission, it was determined that this enhanced buffer along Spring Mill Road would be more appropriate rather than having houses face Spring Mill Road based on its character and the development on the other side of the street, which has the houses backing up. We're also north of that space where it's being proposed for commercial development in terms of a facility, you know, in a larger big box retailer, and it wasn't thought that, you know, as driving past that from 32 past that area that you'd want to see the front of houses directly behind that. You would want to see a buffer, and those residents would have some privacy in their space rather than a front door facing the area behind what could be a larger big box retail situation on the north side of State Road 32. The next slide, please. If you zoom that down just one more click, and there, that's better. Well, go back and there we go. That'll work. Thank you. Additionally, the applicant and Plan Commission received correspondence from NDOT's Aviation Division and the Wheelers, the owner of the east parcel, regarding the existing airstrip. That letter was received back in October, and I've got a paper copy. There's 10 copies here if you'd like to take one and pass that on. I think it's been posted to the agenda, so you have it available to you. But I just wanted to give a paper copy out this evening as part of our presentation. You'll see that letter is from, again, NDOT's Aviation Division. Martin Blake with the Office of Aviation was consulted, and his letter, which was provided to the Plan Commission as part of the public hearing process, resulted in a better understanding by both the Plan Commission and the applicant of the requirements in place to ensure there won't be impacts to the safe and navigable airspace of the airstrip. I've copies of this letter, which I just handed out. This letter outlines the steps that would be required to be taken to satisfy NDOT and the FAA, including but not limited to an airspace evaluation case that will be filed with the FAA before any site permitting could take place on the property. The applicant understands this is a separate governmental approval process that they must undertake to meet all FAA and NDOT requirements. These include, but are not limited to, the items that are noted on the overhead. They would include the barriers, which are fences to provide separation along that east perimeter, setbacks, which require a minimum 150-foot separation from the airstrip to the closest dwelling, noise-sensitive permitting, as well as tall structures regulations. Those are all things that you'll see that are outlined in that letter that, again, has been attached to the agenda, was received in October, and was vetted by discussions with the Plan Commission as we move through the process. Again, while only a recommendation, fences and dwellings with no access to the east perimeter provide that separation from this parcel to the parcel and a barrier which increases safety between the airstrip and the adjacent parcels and wildlife barrier, which does not exist today. So there's an example of that condition that may exist along that east perimeter here with, again, I apologize. You'll see the photograph at the bottom right-hand corner of that illustration. That would be of those dwellings that would exist there. There would be fences between the dwellings to create that courtyard space that the Plan Commission reviewed and may be familiar to the council. We've got an illustration I'll show you in a minute. But then in between those spaces, like on the back side of the pond, the trail would be on the away side of that airstrip parcel, and there would be a ornamental metal fence that would connect between the dwellings. So all that buffer area that we've provided on the far east side adjacent to the east perimeter of the real estate would be inaccessible by the residents and any kids in the community that may be visiting grandparents because we're age restricted and don't have any contribution or ability for kids to be in school under that scenario. Again, as required, there'd be a minimum 150-foot separation from the center line of the airstrip to the preserved area, which would preserve safe travel of aircraft as required under FAA standards. And you'll again see these things outlined in that letter that I handed out. One item to note is that all development surrounding the airstrip today, whether that's past or items currently under construction, that being the commercial development to our south, all those developments had to go through these standards regarding building heights, setbacks, noise permitting, et cetera, including the Meyer Anchored Center on the south side of 32, as well as the plans that are under construction today for the commercial center to our south. Today we're at the zoning phase, and final plans would be submitted to the FAA for approval with a development plan. So all ground is zoned, but it's not until you have a development plan and you would seek the FAA's approval of that development plan would you go through the process to confirm compliance. The council doesn't have the authority to waive those compliance requirements, and we're not asking for any waivers from those requirements. But I just wanted the council to be aware of the extra steps in place that we reviewed with the Plan Commission and understand from the letter from NDOT as they regulate and assist FAA in meeting all our obligations. The next slide. This last slide brings us back to the proposed home product. We've worked diligently with staff to confirm that their comments have all been addressed. We reviewed all comments from the public as well as the Plan Commission members, resulting in the modifications that I've reviewed with you this evening. The work we undertook resulted in significant enhancements to the plans and ultimately, again, a favorable recommendation being sent to the council from the Plan Commission. Tonight, we do understand that the council may desire to undertake additional study of the NDOT and FAA information as it pertains to the rezone request. In the event that's the case, we'll make ourselves available to assist in any way we can in getting the questions that the council may have that they want addressed in advance of adoption consideration by the council. So we're not seeking approval this evening in the event that the council wants to explore this further and have additional dialogue about these standards, and would make ourselves, of course, available to assist in that effort. With that, I'll conclude. We'd be glad to address any questions the council may have at this time or as we advance through the review process at a future date. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Councilors, questions, comments?
Mr. Chairman, I've been approached by the owners of the Westfield Airport that said that this is a situation that could possibly put them out of business. Now, I don't know all the rules and regulations of things, but I think it's something that we need to do to check with the federal FAA and see what federal aircraft, I don't know if it's authority or agency or whatever the language is, but what is really required here and who pays for what. I look at those buildings, and if their dog or a kid gets underneath there and gets out on the runway and a plane hits them, the suit would be large. The lawsuit would be large. And I don't know whether, I'm not really in favor of putting one of my constituents in a situation where that lawsuit is large without more exploitation of this matter. So I'm going to move that we table this item until we can hear from the Federal Aviation Authority, if that's the proper terminology, about how this is affecting the owner and what the owner's liabilities are and what our liabilities are for approving such a thing. So my movement is that we table this until we hear from the FAA, and I'll try to arrange such a public meeting to make that happen. But
I would agree. Can I ask you a couple questions, though?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so, after they went back and reworked things, did they take it back to the NDOT Transportation or the aviation group and ask them and look at it? Because in one area, they said in here that they would give you recommendations of fences. Is that exactly what that is? Is that
Can you
the,
go to the next slide?
sorry, yeah, the one slide.
The revised plan illustrates that, where if you see the homes that are a red dot on those lots, as well as the dashed black line that shows the fence, that would be that barrier. That's only a recommendation in their standards, but we've incorporated it into the ordinance, so it's a requirement for us, not a, so you might think, well, if it's just a recommendation, you don't have to do that. Well, we have to because we incorporated it into the ordinance.
Have y'all sent it back to these folks to say, hey, this is what we've done, and can you give it another look?
Well, this letter is a guidance letter
Right.
on any development that would occur. I guess we could communicate to them, and we will, because Joe's asked us to have some additional dialogue. Here's what we've done in relation to your suggestion. We made it a requirement.
Yeah, okay. I'd like to see, what they say. After these things are completed, because this was from October 25th, and I presume you've had changes since then.
In a similar vein, I've got a question about the water, the ponds that are going to be on the property. I know in the letter it said 10,000 feet from a runway. I'm assuming that's been taken into account as well?
It has been. This is the first slide that shows an aerial of the area, and we're positioned to the west of the site. I apologize, I'll correct this pointer issue, but if I can run the mouse, that'll be better. So, Councilor Fry, that's a requirement that's in place. If we go, maybe I'll even get an exhibit. 10,000 feet is nearly 2 miles. So you've got a requirement for these areas with regard to ponds in a 2-mile jurisdiction. The other height limitations and other things range all the way up to 193rd Street to the north to 171st Street to the south. It's a dimension from the end of the runway. So yes, we have it taken into consideration and revised that plan so that we're comfortable that we'll meet the requirement if we move forward.
So help me understand that, because again, I agree with the math there on 10,000 feet and 2 miles, but I'm not sure how that.
It doesn't say.
That conflicts with what I'm reading here.
It doesn't say there can't be a pond, because there's numerous ponds within that space. And the reason I asked Kevin this is an area that the council rezoned and that the development plan was approved earlier last year, which there are ponds positioned along the east perimeter of this real estate at the end of the runway. They had to go through this process with NDOT and the FAA to assure that they're following all the requirements in that space. Our pond was previously positioned longer ways along this corridor, and we positioned it generally east to west to put us in a better position to address the standards that we know that they'll employ in reviewing the plan in the future.
Okay, and then one other question, if I may. Tell me about the age restriction, please.
Thank you for your question, and I focused a lot on tonight what we heard from council members and the expectation that we're going to have a discussion about the FAA stuff, but so the age restriction that's in place, there's a couple of issues. One, as we all know, they can't have kids live at the area, so there's no impact on schools, but they pay the full fare on property taxes. Another item that we presented, because it came up at the Planning Commission, was a letter. Age-restricted single-family residential under state statute is eligible for TIF consideration. So there's a small part today, and I just learned this when I was looking at the maps. Sorry. So this is really 3 parcels, and it's about, of 68, I'd say it's 22, and about 15. And this 15 acres of the site is actually in one of the TIF districts. I apologize because I looked at it quickly and forgot the name. But in the event that an age-restricted community is constructed on this space, it qualifies for TIF, and that money goes into the pool, if you will, of monies that can be used by the RDC and city to make infrastructure enhancements and other things that they do that Linda did, Ms. Nash did a better job of describing all the things that the RCDC does, and I of course don't know as well as they do, but it pays like commercial is what I'm saying. Because it's age restricted, statute allows for that to be included in this space, and this is conservatively, this is about a $70 million investment in terms of the 184 homes that will be constructed on the site. It pays school referendum on top of that, so anything that's collected that would go into the TIF doesn't affect the school referendum money, and it could be used in the future to finance any improvements that the council or RDC felt were appropriate, that either retire debt service on bonds or build other infrastructure improvements at someone else's discretion, not mine. We're not asking for a development agreement, that's what I'm saying. We're paying into the pool, and whatever the city decides to do, when I say city, collectively, everybody, RDC involved as well, they can do that.
Okay, and just one follow-up on that. I'm gonna ask a question that maybe I should know, so I'm gonna run the risk of embarrassing myself here. On that age restriction, how is that enforced, and is that something that at some point in time, if this HOA decided they wanted to change that, is that something they have the ability to change, or is this?
They would if it wasn't in the ordinance. So there are some communities out there that do this by choice, have an age restriction by choice, and there are others that are mandated by zoning. This would be one that would be mandated by zoning, and it couldn't change without an approval that would be considered by the council in the future.
Okay.
The plan commission was a bit torn on this one, and it was a 6-3 vote. A number of issues were cited, but just bring up a few. Just the number of housing units that have gone up in the area was one of them, and not wanting to see even more of that. Issues with, of course, the airstrip, and worried about that is another. But also there's a broader concern I know that I have is this is supposed to be in the Grand Junction economic development area. I mean, if you will, this was part of that consideration. We don't have a formal Spring Mill corridor plan that lays out specifically exactly what's supposed to be in here. There was a marketing plan that was done for Grand Park that's included in one of our addenda, but it is really a map from a marketing plan. It wasn't fully vetted. But in that sense, it calls for commercial and industrial, really, with some residential supporting it, some higher density residential supporting it. And we already have multiple projects approved within the PUD, and others that are in various parts, I guess, of approval. And we don't know just how many units is appropriate. The addendum didn't call that out. So this has commercial and industrial business park uses to the south. We are hoping to have commercial uses supporting Grand Park on 186th Street. And then this would be in the middle of that. So it's a bit of a disconnect. That was something that was kind of troubling me with this project. But realizing that it didn't put kids in the school, that we were going to have the benefit of the taxes and potentially using it in TIF if needed. Some of these things kind of weighed into my yes vote, but it was reserved. And I wanted to look into this airstrip issue a lot more as well.
And I think those are all, I appreciate you mentioning those. Those are all circumstances that we felt were appealing about this site and this project, in that it pays like commercial in terms of the tax benefits to the community, and it provides.
Well, it's still be capped at 1%, right?
It is.
So it's not really like commercial.
And it's 1% of $70 million.
But it's not 3%.
We could ask, well, I don't think commercial development on the real estate, while it's not planned today, would generate that kind of AV, but I'll maybe reach out to John Rogers or Kai Chuck in the Economic Development Office and see what their experience is based on those approvals, and it's an opportunity here to provide that use, which generates and pays like commercial, but doesn't have an impact on schools. So we thought there were a lot of circumstances that led to positive consideration, and we were glad after the Plan Commission's review that, and your vote, Ms. Beljarek, that we received a favor recommendation.
But
It's still
money,
with reservation, just so you know.
money aside,
Understood.
I'm still not very interested in extinguishing this airstrip.
And I can guarantee you, Mr. Edwards, the standards that the FAA establishes and that NDOT is part of enforcing are there to protect the airstrip and ensure its continuation. And we have to comply with those. And the burden on making sure we do that is ours. I think there was a question about who pays for that. The cost associated with that is all on the developer. There's no cost to the city, no cost to the owner of the airstrip, but that's an obligation that we're prepared to advance in the event that the development moves forward.
But until I'm completely satisfied that this doesn't put this airstrip out of business, if nothing more than the danger of a lawsuit, there's always that present danger, but this increases the danger. I have some hesitation. I want to
Yeah.
know, are we putting people in jeopardy by doing this? And so that's why I want to hear what the Federal Aviation Authority or agency or whatever it is says about this rather than the state of Indiana.
Understood, and
And
please.
I've told you this over the phone anyhow.
Right, and that's why we want to follow up with you later this week and make sure that we have a clear understanding of the questions that you want presented and who we need to contact to obtain those answers so we can get all the information in front of the council before it takes adoption consideration.
Mr. Chairman, I have a motion on the floor.
Before we make the motion, I would also like to add that I share Councilor Edwards' concerns. I did vote for the project as Councilor Spoljarek did, but I've got another concern to this project. And John, can you highlight with your highlighter on the northeast corner of the airstrip? There's kind of a black square up there. Yeah, that whole northeast corner is like 15 acres that abut the airstrip on that northeast side.
Here at the end of the runway?
Yes, right along the runway coming south, so 15, 20-acre parcel there.
Along the east side of Kinsey west side of Kinsey.
South of 86th Street there, yeah. So this is a story, and I am looking forward to having some extra time to investigate this and to meet with our planning department on this, because Councilor Spoljarek and I met with the developer just last week who intends to, and I gather that's part of the Wheeler Landing PUD, and who's planning on putting 10 three-story apartments on that property. So, I mean, from an airstrip standpoint, and from all these good folks who have come here today, the flyers in the room, I would submit that to me, it's more insidious to have a three-story building than to have a one-story building. And so I would like to use this time to investigate whether in fact we're obligated to approve that the three-story, 10-building development as we were told we had to, because it's already part of the development plan, PUD. And so I'm just looking at this, there's more to it than just strictly your PUD, that in my own mind.
And I'm not familiar with that proposal, and we didn't work on the Wheeler Landing PUD, but I'd be glad to sit down with staff and see if we can isolate that and identify it for you.
And I will make the commitment to get with staff also and share that with my fellow councilors here, so we have a full understanding of what's happening along both sides of the airstrip, and because what's the impact going to be of all this? And
Understood.
is this something we want to see? And can we make any changes at this point in time? So, that said,
I have a motion that we table this until we receive some information from the proper authorities, whether that be the FAA or other people that we need to derive information from about the livability of this airport.
Second.
I have a motion made by Counselor Edwards, seconded by Counselor Spajeric. Kim, would you call the roll, please?
Cindy Spillier,
Yes.
Jake Gilbert,
Yes.
Mike Johns,
Yes.
Troy Patton,
Yes.
Joe Edwards,
Yes.
Scott Willis,
Yes.
Scott Fry.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thanks for your time this evening. We look forward to assisting with the extent we can on addressing the questions that have been received this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Moving on, old business ordinance, old business ordinance 21-60, Osborne Trails PUD Amendment 3. This ordinance had a council introduction on December 13th. It went through an APC hearing on January 18th and is up for adoption consideration this evening. Kevin?
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add. I think you covered it all very well. The petitioner is on the call and available for questions, but does not plan on making a presentation.
Motion to approve ordinance 21-60.
Second?
A motion made by Counselor Patton, seconded by Counselor Willis. Kim, would you call the roll, please?
Jake Gilbert,
Yes.
Troy Patton,
Yes.
Joe Edwards,
Yes.
Cindy Spillier,
Yes.
Scott Fry,
Yes.
Mike Johns,
Yes.
Scott Willis.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you, Kim. All right, we have no new business this evening. Moving on to guests. Do we have any guests residents who would like to address the council tonight?
I have 3 cards now. First card, Ryan Wheeler.
Hello, Council, Mayor. Appreciate the time to come before you today. In particular, I'm here about the courtyards at Spring Mill that was discussed earlier on. We obviously have provided quite a bit of information over this last weekend via ourselves and others that have joined us in our concerns over this development. In the end, it's I think we've expressed a large concern that this is just not a compatible land use next to an airport. There's safety issues and noise concerns that we've brought up. Don't feel that the items that were entered or mentioned by NDOT were addressed appropriately in the latest version of their plan. I appreciate the fact that you guys are going to take a minute to reconsider this and get some more information. I would request that you get with airport owners, the airport authority, other people that can help you out with the information, because I don't think that the FAA requirements are going to be enough to protect our city and this area in particular. The FAA provides advisories, right? They have reams and reams of paper of here's what we've learned over the years, of here's how to manage wildlife, here's how to keep the area growing and thriving, but they don't require any of that. It all comes down to our local planners, our local people deciding to use that information to come up with a good plan. And even the Indiana code that was mentioned about the noise sensitive permit purposes, this is an area where our state has said, hey, this is something serious. You really shouldn't build a residence or a school or other noise sensitive purposes within this zone around an airport. But in the end, they leave it to us to make a decision, you guys to make a decision on what's best. And at most what they ask the petitioner to do is fill out a web form and get a permit. But they really rely on our planning department, our individuals to make solid decisions. So beyond just getting what the minimum requirements are from the FAA, we need to look at what is smart for our city, and in particular this plot of land. I think in the APC meeting last week, it was said, we all really like what this product, we like this development. It just doesn't seem to make sense on this particular piece of property right up against their runway, and I agree with that. In addition, were a few things that were brought up this evening, as far as all other businesses around had to go through the same permitting. They will not, because they're not housing. They're not, the commercial don't have to go through the noise sensitive permitting. So they aren't going to go through all of them because it's a good use next to an airport. As far as ponds, orienting a pond north-south versus east-west doesn't change the amount of geese that land on that pond. I'm sorry. And yes, FAA wants it, or NDOT wants it 2 miles away. I think we all realize that that's a little much, but certainly the closer we get to that active airport runway, the more critical it gets to. So putting something right next to the runway, especially where in their map they have buildings on 3 sides. So a geese, when the engine roars and they do their fight or flight and birds flight, their options are go towards this building, this building, this building, or this open area. And that open area is our runway where the airplane is taking off. So I don't think that those concerns were appropriately addressed. So anyway, we also, lastly, we need to consider future growth about this area. This airport was developed in 1954 by my grandfather. At that time, Westfield was a small farm town, right? I graduated in 1996 from Westfield High School. There was less than 100 kids in my class. We were still a farm town. We've grown. We're a 6A school system, and we're growing every single year. We get more and more residents. We probably need to consider what we see the future of this airport being. I know in the Wheeler Landing PUD are talking to corporate offices and people that want to develop on the east side of the runway. I can see us saying, hey, we want to not tie ourselves in to not being able to have some of maybe a hard surface runway someday, businesses that are associated, instrument approaches so that we can use it in all weather conditions. All of these things ratchet you up on those tables of requirements for safety zones. So we need to not make a decision today that hems us into not having something that grows with the community around it. And finally, to the point of going out of business, that comment didn't come specifically from me, but I can speak to it in that 184 houses right next to a runway that's going to be used at dawn on every Saturday and Sunday where there's good weather. There's going to be complaints, right? There's just not, we can't imagine that there's 184 people that are spending $500,000 on this house. In the APC meeting, they mentioned that some could be up to 750 people spending $750,000 on a house and expect to have that noise right outside their back window. So anyway, appreciate your guys' time, but I'm sorry, I thought that alarm was my time and I had to get that wrapped up. Sorry.
It's the shepherd's hook.
So anyway, so those noise complaints. I received a complaint from an individual that lives 3 miles from the airport 2 weeks ago. I can't imagine the amount of complaints that we will get both for our airport as well as the city of all these residents that are going to be right next to it going forward. And that's this kind of stuff that will stunt the growth of the airport, right? You have a group of houses where people have spent a lot of money and don't like the fact that they came into this area where there's lots of noise. They end up complaining a lot to both you and us, and then we can't grow any further and do the things that we need to as a city. And that's the kind of thing I think that is coming forward in that expression, that this kind of stuff puts people out of business, because it does become so many voices of so many houses of people that are just don't like to live next to it. And so I don't feel it's a good fit for this area. I like the product, wish they could just find something else that wasn't right here. I'm available for questions. I'm available for anything. If you would like any information on the operation of the airport, or other areas like Indianapolis Executive that have recently laid out a plan for development around their airports. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ray.
Tom McNutt.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. Thanks for allowing me to spend a moment to speak. I think there's so many things that have been already addressed. I don't want to beat a dead horse here. There are a number of things. Noise is going to be a consideration regardless of what happens with the residential community so close to an airport. In my email, I mentioned that I'm a former board member of the Aviation Authority at Executive Airport. They recently conducted a study for compatible uses around the airport, and I think that study is publicly available and would really provide some insight as to what is considered compatible uses by NDOT and the FAA. FAA and NDOT have spent millions of dollars every year on wildlife management, airport design, and safety. And I think their criteria is so crystal clear, and I don't believe this project comes close to satisfying NDOT or the FAA's setbacks and whatnot. Airports are designed with a pattern, and any subdivision within that pattern is going to be subject to aircraft flying over it low repeatedly day after day, and you just can't get away from that. Left-hand pattern's a left-hand pattern. It's on the map. It's regulation. Having said that, I really appreciate you folks delving into the regulations and whatnot and taking a look at this, giving us time to present some facts. And I'd like to follow up with an email to you folks and some other points. If that's acceptable.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Marla Ayler.
Good evening, Mayor, councilors. As always, I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to address the council. Over the weekend, I was forwarded an email from one of my neighbors in Chatham Hills. Sent and signed by Hinkie Development Group, the letter indicates that costly road impact fees have been paid and right-of-way has been donated to the city in anticipation of the widening of Tomlinson Road. The letter further states that this project should have been completed, quote, years ago, and that it is capable of being completed now, and it doesn't need to be delayed any further for other projects to be improved. Those of us who pay attention, though, know that most of the monies in the road impact fee fund have been earmarked for the State Road 32 widening. As a reminder to the council and the public, this was done so through an interlocal agreement in 2018, which changed the funding mechanism from a federal program at an 80-20 split, which would have cost the city $3 million, to state funding, which obligates the city to pay $7.5 million instead. In other words, the very funds for which Hinkie Development and the good neighbors of Chatham Hills have paid for toward their infrastructure improvements are being spent on a different project. What is remarkable is that neither the widening of 191st Street nor Tomlinson Road appears on the administration's capital improvement project list at this time, not so much as a mention. The director of the Department of Public Works has a responsibility to provide an essential network of roadways that make up Westfield's system of infrastructure, the condition of which can significantly add to the quality of life in our community as well as contribute to property values. Notwithstanding these important factors, in tough budget times, capital maintenance projects, construction, and future planning often give way to funding of more visible public programs. Unfortunately, the prevailing mentality among elected officials is often to fix something only when it breaks. As I'm sure this council knows, it's much cheaper to maintain the city's assets than to replace them after they completely deteriorate. Yet, management practices have led to the deterioration of some projects in Westfield in favor of spending money on other things. The constant diversion of funds isn't helping today. The capital improvement plan is an important document that has largely been internal, so for the record, I'm asking what and when is the plan to improve public safety on Tomlinson Road and 191st Street, including engineering, ingress and egress, lighting and signage, and everything it would take to complete it, because my neighbors and I would really like to know. There's a lot of construction traffic there. I've witnessed a side mirror being sheared off of an RV simply because there was another vehicle on the road. On Friday, 2 dump trucks were passing each other north and south and actually had to stop. There is a pinch point on the road that I would encourage you guys to all come see if you haven't. But if you drive anything bigger than a small sedan, it can be very, very frightening. We've got the school administration building going there, apartments, Chatham Village, and my Chatham neighbors and Mr. Hinkey have always been very, very good neighbors. But I've lived there for 22 years. There's a lot I can tolerate, but the safety, my son has his permit, and it just scares the living daylights out of all of us. So I'd just like you to take a look at it, and I'd appreciate your thoughtful time. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark.
Jeremy, would you like to respond? Also about the 80/20.
Yeah, I don't, so the 80/20 comment associated with the State Road 32 project, the $3 million commitment as compared to the $7.5 million commitment, I have no idea where that comes from. I've never heard anything like that. Our commitment has always been 50% of the project, which is $7.5 million worth of investment. So I would need to understand more where that's coming from. As for improvements to 191st Street, we've been working on that corridor since prior to Grand Park even being constructed, most specifically the section that impacts Tomlinson Road and Miss Ayler's area of the world, which is 31 to Tomlinson Road. It's already designed, it's been bid, construction has started. It's the dead of winter, so it's obviously very slow right now, but that is a funded 2022 construction project. As for Tomlinson Road, clearly been on our radar for a very long time. The comment about the right-of-way being dedicated, that is true. That occurred in late September of 2021. We now have the east side right-of-way, which allows us to expand Tomlinson Road to the east so that it can be improved. The city has not been ignoring the problem. A couple years ago, 3 maybe, I think 2018, we did a full-depth patching and resurfacing project through there. There is or was no right-of-way really on either side of the road at that point in time, inclusive of a couple sections of that road that aren't even City of Westfield's jurisdiction, weren't at the time, very likely are now. So our intention was to design the improvements, because it does require engineering. We're widening it. It has drainage that has to be accommodated, and there has to be utility relocations associated with it. Was intended to be done in 2022 with a 2023 construction project, which you would be considering in your 2023 budget when that time comes around. In conversation with Mr. Nail, city engineer, it is possible, if council wants to additionally appropriate some construction dollars, that we could put this into the 2022 program. It does take some time to design it, obviously. Utility relocations is going to be our critical path. on all projects, but specifically this one. So once we design it, we got to get a work plan from them. It's got to be approved, and then we go on their schedule. So that would be really what drives whether or not we could build it in 2022. As she stated, our budget's been approved. Our dollars are being allocated toward State Road 32 as per the plan from 2017, 2018. If council wants to find another way to fund that construction project, you certainly have my support. Otherwise, you'll see the construction dollars program for the 2023 budget.
Jared?
Would you mention Chad Riddle Drive?
Yeah, Chad Hiddle Drive. So that's another project we've been talking about for a very long time. So as a part of the 191st Street construction project, there will be a roundabout built at Chad Hiddle Drive, which goes into the Chatham Commons, or the commercial section where the hotel is. That road, and the city's already committed to contributing via impact fees of the development, $5.5 million, I believe it is, to construct Chad Hiddle Drive up to 206th Street, Miss Ayler's Road, basically. So that road, that has always been in our mind as the release valve for Tomlinson Road. So that would be the primary entrance and exit to Chatham Hills. So you would come off 31, go north up through the commercial development. There's some residential components up there, and then you could enter into the Chatham proper, we'll call it, that way, which will alleviate some of the traffic on Tomlinson Road, hopefully slowing it down in others.
What's the time frame on that, Joe?
It is constructed with the development. So there's a piece of it I can't remember which section of Chatham, but there's a townhome portion of Chatham that's under construction right now at 196th Street, yeah, which will build the first section of that, first section north of the creek, right? So there's the Little Eagle Creek tributary, I believe, that runs on the north side of the hotel, we'll call it, which will be bridged, and it'll continue to extend north.
Is it fair to say that would take several years before it's completed?
Absolutely, yeah. And it's at the speed of the development, right? So that section could take off, and you may see more coming out of the ground next year. We're at the liberty of the developer.
So if we wanted to expedite something, it would be to focus on Tomlinson Road itself.
In my opinion, financially, that's our only option. The bridge alone would cost as much as our Tomlinson improvements, which inevitably have to happen no matter what.
Well, I'm very concerned about Tomlinson Road too.
Sure, as we are.
I've got friends that live in Chatham. Heck, I built a couple houses in Chatham, so I've driven up and down that road myself almost on a daily basis. It can get pretty frightening at times. Every now and then you have a white knuckle experience there.
Understood.
If you said in order to get started this year, is it predominantly just the design work that would get done this year?
It would be the design work and the coordination for all the preliminary stuff. So utility relocations, again, is going to be the driving force. It's really pretty hard to bid a project without having an approved work plan for the utility relocations as well as a schedule from the utilities. And there'll be more than one. It's not just a utility. So it'll be driven by Duke more than anything.
Is it possible for you to give us a rough estimate of what the cost would be to this year's budget if we decided to move forward?
Certainly is once we get a little further in design. Absolutely. I can't give you that today. Nothing solid enough for me to be, bringing it to the council yet. But in the first portion of design, we'll get engineers' estimates.
Do we have to take a vote to authorize the design work?
No,
Or can
no. We have dollars. We have dollars available
do it
to.
now?
Yeah. So we're going to start the design no matter what. We've already had that conversation. We had it actually late last year, really right after the right of way was dedicated. We started talking about who do we want to get on. Is there an ideal consultant? How we want to go about selecting, if we want to do an RFP, or if is it a small enough project that we can hand select somebody that's very qualified to do it based on the qualified selection process, qualification-based selection. So in the next month, we'll determine what we're going to do, and we'll hopefully have a contractor or a consultant on board that can start driving the project forward. But it's not new because of the outpour of emails that we received this weekend. Like I said, we've been working on it for years. 2 of the Hinkey's development team used to work for us, and they're very familiar with the project, and I was a little surprised to see it come out exactly the way it did. But not new, been on our radar for a very long time.
But it's not on our capital improvement program.
We have been waiting to receive the right-of-way before he could give a firm timeline. And we didn't know when Hinkey would be rezoning that land on the east side of the road. That's how we obtained the land. We couldn't afford to buy all that right-of-way, or I guess we could buy it, but then we wouldn't have any money to construct the roadway. Knowing that the right-of-way was coming, it was a matter of when. Well, it just happened.
Is there a way, and I don't know the cost, to, and you'll never hear me say this typically, cut down trees, which you don't hear me
The trees
say.
will have to come down.
Well, I mean, can we do that sooner rather than later?
Can we do a clearing project?
And could we actually add, just a little bit of gravel, a few feet would be so helpful, even just to do those 2 things. In the short term, I mean, it's not obviously a permanent fix, but right now it is just untenable. And I can't think of a concrete mixer and a school bus both on that road at the same time. That just spells disaster to me, so.
Completely understood, and the short answer is, as of October 1st of 2021, yes, we can cut the trees down. We can absolutely add stone, that's easy, so long as we don't impede the drainage on the east side. All things we can look at as interim solutions. I think we should all prepare ourselves for the impact of cutting the trees down and what that's going to do from a public perspective.
You mean a negative perspective?
Yes,
Well, they're
absolutely.
gonna have to be cut down anyway.
They are, yeah, but at least we'll have a clear plan of what exactly needs to come down, as opposed to us just going and clear cutting right of way, which we absolutely have the right to do. But certainly in the name of safety, and I'm happy to do that
Because
if
right
that's
now,
the
it's
direction we want to
then
go.
city right of way. I mean, it's, going to be ours, and yet we have a safety issue with it right in
Mhm.
our face, and we're not doing anything. So, gotta.
Again, it's only been 2 months that we've had access to the land. 2 months.
If, and again, I think I understand correctly that this could be worked into the 2022 calendar.
If there was an additional appropriation, yes.
If that appropriation occurs. If that appropriation occurs, then it's safe to assume, and correct me where my thinking is flawed here, it's safe to assume that money that would have been budgeted for that project in 2023 just would not need to be budgeted next year. So we're spending the money early and not spending it next year instead.
That is, I think, a fair assessment.
Okay.
But with moving of all those poles to complete the project in '22 would
So our lead,
take an act of Duke.
our lead time on the 161st and Union Roundabout for Duke
Yeah.
was 9 months for material delivery after the work plan approval. And it's non-negotiable.
But we're gonna have that regardless of whether it's a
We are.
2022 or whether it's a 2023 project.
Correct, so that's why it's important we get rolling really quickly, get the work plans approved, get on their schedule, and then we will be able to, it's really hard to bid a project and have a good contractor give you a solid number if they don't know if they can start next week or in 6 months.
Fair. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Well, and it's my thought, I don't know that we have to have a vote on this, but I personally think that we should move forward with the design work and whatever, and taking down those trees to make it safe as possible. So, do we have general agreement? Yep. Counselor?
I don't think Jeremy needs that from us.
Yeah,
you said.
he's already on it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
We appreciate your direction.
Thank you, Mayor.
If you,
Kevin,
and
any
if-
more
yeah,
cards?
if you're ready to move on, we do have a fourth card. Amy Solomon.
Sorry to keep everybody a minute longer. I really appreciate you guys' service to the city of Westfield. A lot of things, I'm here to talk about the airport and the subdivision that's proposed going in next to it, and I appreciate you tabling that discussion. The only reason I wanted to speak up was to shorten some of your research, because I've done quite a bit of it over the past few days, and some of these documents might springboard you toward some answers. One of the things I wanted to point out very quickly is the Federal Aviation Administration says in their own documents they don't have the authority to directly control land uses, and land use decisions are often made at the local level, and it's important that land use planners understand the implications of land use and compatibility between airports and the neighborhoods. We have a chicken and an egg situation. If we were trying to build an airport in Westfield, then we would need a lot of things from the FAA. But you're trying to build a neighborhood next to an airport, so you can absolutely do that if you want to. The FAA can give you some minimum requirements for what it takes for us to land a plane. If I, as a new pilot, use the minimum requirements to land my plane, I'm not gonna be able to land in Westfield anymore. I'm gonna have to go land somewhere where there's some room to do it, little cornfield, some industrial area. I can't look at those backyards and try to slip in there. These documents, actually, when I was going through them, I felt a little better, maybe not the only person that feels that way, because you'll see incompatible land use can limit the functionality and utility of an airport. Incompatible land uses, such as structures that encroach into protected airspace, may eventually cause displacement of a runway's threshold in order to maintain safety margins. A displaced threshold shortens the usable length of a runway and therefore limits the type of aircraft that can operate on that runway. We're not flying Lear jets out at Westfield. We're not a bunch of people who make zillions of dollars. I fly a plane that my father built with his own hands, a 1942 plane. We have a whole lot of historical planes out there at the Westfield Airport. You're talking about putting historical signs, maybe spending some money on historical signs to put throughout Westfield to make it more beautiful. And I would put it to you that the hundreds and hundreds of people who visit us at our community days, who are not pilots, who are not business people, who own the airport, and it's not putting the airport out of business, it's us in the community that enjoy the community days. I must lift 30 little kids into the plane that my dad built every single time we have community days in Westfield. So we have benefits to the community that are not just selfish. We serve the community as well. So if you make it so we can't use our runway because it's a postage stamp in the middle of neighborhoods, they can't really slip into anymore, we won't be offering that service to the community anymore either. And that's something else to consider, a well-rounded community that doesn't just have signs about history, that maintains some history too, really makes sense. So I appreciate you tabling it, but I hope, I have several copies of this document, and that's what I was saying. I think if you could look at it, it's 116 pages. I've pulled out only 10 pages of the very most relevant comments to you as the planners that would help you to figure out what your responsibilities and liabilities, the liabilities are in here as well. So your responsibilities and liabilities, as far as making the decision. I think this could really help you. If I could leave these documents with you guys, I would appreciate it. And that's all. Thank you so much, you guys.
Thank you. Kevin, do you have any more cards?
I do not.
Okay. Clerk treasurer comments, clerk treasurer's not here. City council comments,
Start with Counselor Spojek.
I'll report on the ARPA committee. We met on the 19th of January. Legal counsel from Barnes and Thornburg updated us on the details and the final guidance that was issued by the Treasury. And the biggest change for us is probably the standard deduction revenue loss, which essentially allows us to use our full disbursement for any governmental service. So again, we were restricted before in our uses. This would allow us to definitely open up our potential uses. We heard from Jeremy Lawler about the infrastructure projects that could be considered with those funds. And we also had multiple nonprofits in the audience that were able to explain some of their losses and needs to get a feel of what they are dealing with out there. So lower fundraising, greater needs, and expanded service, as well as additional projects to meet future needs were what we heard most. And that wasn't all of our nonprofits, that was just a few. The committee is working with Barnes and Thornburg on the application template, which we thought they weren't going to be able to help with, now they are. But that did get us held up because we were waiting for the guidance change. We will need to update our council-approved general plan, the one that we've approved here with the buckets, to memorialize the revenue loss election and drill down further on the details with the new guidance. One of the big discussion topics was the why, and as we know, we've had a request that was actually before we ever received any funds from ARPA, requesting $5 million from the city to go toward construction for the Y. So that is still on the table for consideration. I would like to have much more public input on that. We will have Shannon from the Y coming to talk to us next month on the 14th here at council. And before that, we will be having our next ARPA meeting on February 11th, 2 o'clock right here. We'll be discussing this and all kinds of other stuff dealing with ARPA, so feel free to tune in. It's also on YouTube. And the APC met January 18th. And let's see, the officers will remain as previous. The detailed development plan for a building at the depot at Spring Mill Station, which is in the southwest corner, was approved. The Springwater PUD on South Union, Justin had made changes, but there was still some issues identified. He was working further to address the comments that were still being received, and he's coming back to the APC next month. And as you know, the Courtyards we heard tonight, and that obviously is being tabled. Public hearings were for Belcanto PUD, which was introduced here, the Ditch Road Fire Station Overall Development Plan, and the Osborne Trails PUD amendment for signage, which we heard tonight. And then Kristen gave us an update about the downtown streetscape planning efforts. Much of it you heard here tonight. And Kevin also let us know that that will be a regular agenda item now, downtown updates. So we appreciate that. That's it.
Thank you, Cindy. Jake?
We'd just like to tell the audience and anyone listening, on Sunday from 2 to 5 at Westfield High School, the Wellbeing Coalition will be hosting our first wellness wellbeing fair. So we have 42 Westfield residents, businesses, wellness providers who will set up shop in the MPIF of the high school for anyone and everyone to come and patronize our local businesses and people who are who want to get connected in these ways, dietitians, gyms, athletic wear, and mental health providers. There will also be a stage with demonstrations, including everything from dance to cooking and things like that. So if you're interested in wellness in any way, shape, or form, 2 to 5 at the high school this Sunday, our first well-being fair.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Just the update on the ad hoc committee, Scott, Troy, and myself met, and BKD did collaborate about the scope of the investigation and some of the disagreements we had, and agreed to reduce the bill by $10,000, which we were very grateful for that.
Councilors? Okay, I've got a couple comments this evening. First of all, just kind of an update for everybody. The action on ordinance 21-34, which was the Urban Apples PUD. We tabled that on January 10th with the idea of meeting with the petitioner over the last couple weeks. That did not happen. We had our attorney reach out and speak to the petitioner's counsel, and we've not heard back yet. So we want to give the petitioner ample time to respond, so we're going to hold off on bringing that ordinance back before the council until our next meeting on February 14th. Secondly, there is a public meeting, which I'm not sure, no one has really addressed yet tonight, for State Road 32, which is scheduled for Wednesday, this Wednesday, January 26th, 6 p.m. at Grand Park. Hopefully everybody can attend that meeting. It's a meeting that's being held by INDOT, basically, and Structure Point, and INDOT will be presenting the most current and updated design plans for State Road 32. I know we're operating under a kind of a tight window here to approve our designs and get them to them by March 31st, but we don't actually have the final design from INDOT yet. So it's kind of a yin and a yang deal here. But I think the meeting will be important for all Westfield residents to attend, so let your friends know, be at the meeting, take a look at the designs. It really, I believe it'll be really the last opportunity for the residents of Westfield to give an update as far as what they think of the 32 plans moving forward. So that's a pretty exciting deal. And then the final thing, and this is something I probably would address with the mayor at a later date, but I just became aware of this afternoon about 6 o'clock before our meeting, Mr. Mayor. And I saw that there's a time constraint on Wednesday, so I was wondering if you could kind of update the council on the status of Ordinance 21-61, which is the 2022 Policies and Procedures Manual. It had a council introduction on December 13th last year, and had been scheduled to be up for council adoption on the 27th. It was put off, held back, and now I noticed when I looked at the agenda for the Public Works meeting for Wednesday, that is on the Public Works meeting, and that there have been changes redlined to that ordinance, which now says where it used to say the city council approves these policies and procedures, it now has been redlined out and it says the Board of Public Works approves these policies and procedures. So if you can kind of enlighten the council.
Well, our council advises us that manual is an administrative function, not a legislative function, and therefore comes under the purview of the Board of Public Works.
As far as, it just strikes me as strange that the Board of Public Works would be approving the salary ordinances and whatnot for human resources and.
It didn't. The salary ordinances are approved by the council. That's different than the policies and procedures manual, which, as the mayor correctly says, is an administrative function. But nothing more to add to that.
All right, so that was something that was just discovered in the last couple weeks, 3 weeks.
I'm sorry?
That was something that was noted in the last 3 weeks?
I don't remember when I had the discussion.
So that was here, now it's not, it's just a Board of Works?
Oh, it's still here. It's a city policy and procedure manual. It's an administrative function that will be approved by the Board of Works, which is the proper body for that type of approval. There's nothing secret about it. It'll be on the, as you mentioned, it'll be on the dais for Board of Public Works approval.
Okay.
And they're allowed to change things that are in there, and I know that there was discussion about different vacation times and pay and these kind of things. It does come back to us.
Which part comes back to you, Madam Councilwoman?
Well, I
The
would say
salaries are
I've been-
approved by you every year.
I've
That's-
been
that-
asked to
that's not
respond
changed.
to, I'm responding to the State Board of Accounts regarding 2 salary issues, which the State Board asked me to respond to them on.
Well, can't discuss those. Those are still under
I
seal.
understand that.
Right? And so the fact that you're even mentioning them is improper. I would point that out first. And second, happy to discuss those in public once they're made public, but those are issues that the clerk's office should be well aware of.
Well, I just find it extremely unusual that going back 3 weeks ago, you had said that you'd be presenting this ordinance to us, and now it's not being presented to us, so.
It was never an ordinance. I never said I would present anything.
Well,
It's
there
properly, it's in its proper place, sir.
There was an ordinance that was presented on December 13th.
It's in its proper
And
place.
you indicated that you would be presenting it back on December 27th and never did.
It's in its
I
proper
think we
place.
can go back to the records of that night, and we can hear that. We can all listen to the YouTube if we'd like to.
What's the issue? There's nothing to hide here. It's gonna be approved or disapproved publicly at the Board of Works meeting. I'm failing to see what the issue is.
It's always been done.
We couldn't hear
I
that.
don't know.
Someone online, we couldn't hear.
But
I said that.
I'm going to just ask that our council take a look at this, because historically, it's always been a purview of the.
Happy to talk to Ann as always, but historically and what's always been done in the past is always a bad answer.
Real quick.
Some of the
I'm-
things that we have done historically are the very things that we have had corrected as we've brought on our new council here in the last year.
I really don't care, but, I mean, and actually, this is the first I've heard of this, actually, but just communicate it.
Oh,
Maybe-
sure. Yeah,
maybe-
no, it wasn't meant to be a secret. Obviously, it's a public
Well, I know
approval,
that.
but I get your
that-
point.
All I'm
I
saying,
get it.
Manny, you're very defensive about it.
Not
Just
at all.
communicate it to all of us.
No,
And then I
no.
don't think it's that big of a deal.
No, I get it. Not defensive at all. Happy to discuss it.
Real quick, I want to be clear on a statement that you made, Manny, and just to provide clarity for me. That now going through the Board of Public Works, that's going to allow them to make decisions about vacation time and things of that nature.
Administrative decisions are gonna be made, they should be made within the administrative departments and by the Board of Public Works. Salary decisions,
That's your opinion.
sir, that's why I'm here.
That's your opinion.
That's my legal conclusion.
So needless to say, we've got okay. We need to have very quick conversations with our legal team, I guess. So, all right. Yeah, I agree with Counselor Patton that at the end of the day, I don't know that where it resides matters a lot. I think this is another example, though, of things that just, you know, we talk about trust issues, we talk about the ability to work together, and the immediate defensiveness of it's in its right place, it's in its right place, it's in its right place, it's where it belongs, it's where it belongs. Just be professional, just communicate, pretty simple.
Absolutely. Just as simple as communicating that issue before the public open meeting, right? Give me a phone call.
Do these meetings always have to end with this kind of?
It never had to.
I'm
Never
speaking,
had to.
thank you.
I don't care. It never had to.
I would request these meetings don't have to end with this kind of embarrassing discord. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, was that embarrassing? Yeah. I apologize for the embarrassment then. But to me, that was simply communication. To me, that was, we have an issue. We need to discuss it. Not only we have an issue, but that's an issue for the taxpayers. The taxpayers need visibility to that kind of stuff, that type of information as well. That's it.
Like in the open meeting with the Board of Public Works.
I couldn't hear you.
That's right. Agreed.
Any other comments? Mayor?
I think I made mine, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's call the meeting.
I've got, if we could, just real quick, on the handout that was submitted by the last public speaker, there aren't enough copies for each of you. So what I'll do is I'll scan this tomorrow morning and email it out, if that's okay. Yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks.
Do we have to sign anything? We didn't really vote on it, did we?
Yeah.